Chapter 862. Do you know the origin of the energy vortex? Wu Kai scoffed. I heard that there are a few hundred spirit objects inside. Out of cautiousness, Go Qing Wendao ordered half of the warships to maintain combat readiness, to deal with any possible ambushes. Other than that, the nimble small-scale warships formed into formations, with over 10 warships forming a tight patrolling net, to prevent small-scale enemy attacks. The large-scale warships were extremely spacious and extremely comfortable. The stronghold that had just been constructed at the estuary was completely destroyed, and everyone could only stay on the warships. But from the people who came and went, they found out that the conditions inside the Shang continent were even worse. With the continuous rain, even the master did not have a house, and could only squeeze onto the small-scale warships, causing everyone to feel much better. If the star door was truly inside the blue swamps, it would definitely be a terrible matter for them. If it is in the blue swamps, then it will be troublesome. Ken laughed bitterly. Cliff did not explain the situation, but only described the enemy's style and character, which was extremely convincing. 5 days had passed since the attack on the Shang continent, but Go Qing Wendao's face remained as gloomy as a cloud. The generals and soldiers under him knew why their master was frustrated, and tactfully did not provoke him. Stop joking. Ken nodded his head while Zeke's expression became serious. They had fought with the Southern Alliance for so long, and they had experienced the enemy's tenacity. Out of the 3 of them, he was the oldest and had the most experience. In the past, Zeke had been under him for a period of time, and was personally promoted by him and recommended to the boss, thus obtaining Go Qing Wendao's recognition, allowing him to control the army alone. Wu Kai, who had just finished his patrol, came to the dining hall on the warship, and joined his comrades who were chatting. But no one was too worried about it. After the continuous battles, everyone had a better understanding of the Southern Alliance's fighting style. The Southern Alliance was proficient in positional warfare in the continent, adept at using fortifications to defend, adept at tangling in complicated terrains, for example urban warfare, or using the wreckage of warships to fight. To attack a stronghold, it required a large fleet of warships to be able to achieve it. A few dozen people would not pose any threat to such a large fleet of warships. We can only play cards. What else can we do? Maybe we can do something more exciting. Wu Kai was secretly pleased with himself. He threw out the idea that he had long thought of. He pointed at the huge energy vortex outside the window. Do you see that thing? Zeke said disapprovingly, I think you are thinking too much. They can only retreat. Only by retreating can they gain strategic depth. Otherwise, are they going to wait here to be wiped out by us? The 3 of them immediately rushed into the curtain of rain, assembled the team and began to search the nearby blue swamp. The blue swamp's tentacles extended to every corner of the sacred region. Many continents had blue swamps, but what everyone was worried about was the blue tide. The blue dwarves were natural enemies with humans. No one knew what the depths of the blue swamp looked like. There were many powerful experts who wanted to explore it, but no one came back alive. Finding the legendary star gate that led to the heavenly road was their most urgent goal. Even if he couldn't find it immediately, he could at least lock onto the general location of the Stargate. The Southern Alliance would definitely not allow themselves to be captured, but as long as they found the star door, all of the Southern Alliance's counterattacks would become a joke. Even the delightfully fragrant sun tea had lost some of its flavor. Now it seemed that this possibility was very high. Hearing that, Ken and Zeke's spirits were roused. Oh my god, I want to puke from seeing the cards. Who can come up with something new? For example, find a girl? What's going on tonight? I'm so bored. Sigh, during the war I always look forward to rest, but after resting for a few days I feel so bored. Ken nodded his head and said, for them to give up the Shang continent so easily, they definitely have something up their sleeves. We cannot let our guard down. Master, are you still worried about the Southern Alliance? Zeke glanced at the ashen-faced Go Qing Wendao and raised his teacup with a relaxed expression. When everyone saw the energy regiment, they were shocked. That's right, they are opponents worthy of respect. I am truly curious about what they will do next. Zeke's eyes flickered with fighting intent. A few hundred. Cliff said decisively, we will split into 3 directions and search at the same time, to increase our efficiency. That's right. Zeke's mind was the fastest. Since they can appear in the Shang continent, then the Stargate must be somewhere nearby. Ken spoke without hesitation. I will immediately send people to search the nearby blue swamps. The gigantic energy vortex was said to be formed from a huge battle and was near the estuary. When they anchored their warships, they intentionally distanced themselves from it as everyone was worried that it would suddenly explode. Zeke was extremely respectful towards Cliff and was curious. Do you think that they can still create any waves? It is possible. Cliff nodded his head. The Southern Alliance first appeared in the Shang continent. This information has been verified many times. It is definitely not wrong. If there are no stargates on the ground or in the sky, then the most probable place would be the blue swamps. Don't forget they once sold quite a number of Empyrean ice tree spears. Obviously they had once ventured deep into the blue swamps. That was what many of the middle-ranking officers and soldiers were thinking. The enemy's base was already destroyed by them. What waves could the enemy do? Snatch the Shang continent from their hands? So on the whole, everyone was rather relaxed. Although due to the strict orders from above, no one dared to celebrate and vent their frustrations, but everyone was already looking forward to returning victoriously. Everyone laughed out loud. That's right, regardless of anything, the enemy was an opponent that could easily surrender. Not on the ground or in the sky. Ken was startled. If we were to say that the savage continent was isolated from the outside world and had never been conquered, then the vastness and mystery of the blue swamps made people even more fearful. The trade route between the savage continent and the honorable Martial continent was not severed, and with regards to the savage continent's information and news, everyone was still able to obtain it. There is not a single person in the entire Shang continent and you still want to look for girls? Ken had an honest personality. He did things meticulously and never found it troublesome. If even he said it was troublesome, then it was truly troublesome. The other two's faces did not look good either. Blue swamps, don't forget about the blue swamps. Zeke reminded. Cliff spoke out indifferently, don't look down on your opponents, Zeke. Outside of the Shang continent's estuary, there were many warships docked with masts. It was a spectacular sight. All of the large and medium-scale warships and transport ships under Goqing Wendao were unable to enter the Shang continent, and could only be docked outside the estuary. Now that both parties had switched locations, occupying the estuary, the large-scale warships were like a fortified stronghold. Seeing the mud everywhere and being stuck inside the small-scale warships, everyone's emotions were unimaginable. Cliff noticed that the atmosphere was gloomy and spoke. Even if it's in the blue swamps, we have to find it. Everyone knows what Heaven's Road means to Temple, to the honorable Martial continent, and to us. We have already taken over the Shang continent. How can we retreat at such a time? Furthermore, even if we find it difficult, what about the Southern Alliance? They came to the Sacred Saint Galaxy from Heaven's Road. Don't tell me that the threat of the blue swamps only exists for us? All of the soldiers exclaimed out in shock. Spirit objects were priceless treasures in their eyes, and could never be compared to a few hundred of them. Oh. Ken shook his head. We have already searched the entire Shang continent, but have not found any star doors. As long as there were living spirits, their strength would undergo a qualitative change in a short period of time. The three generals under Goqing Wendao all had their own specialties. Cliff's personality was firm and unwavering. Ken was honest and steady. Zeke was naturally astute. The three of them had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding. They tactfully avoided their boss, and if they were to meet with the muzzle of a gun, they would be killed for nothing if they angered their boss. Ken was speechless. He could not find any reason to refute. It was true, a thin defensive line was unable to provide the Shang continent with sufficient protection, and upon being broken through, the situation would undoubtedly become even more dangerous. Then what's so funny about it? The soldier who was being teased stared at Wu Kai. The blue swamps was another world and the blue dwarves were the natives of the blue swamps. After a short moment of silence, everyone became restless. Cliff was quiet for a moment, then spoke up. I do not know what other plans they have, but I can't help but think of Xie Yuan. They have never lacked fighting spirit and have never given up so easily. It is not their style to lay down their arms and surrender. This news is definitely not wrong. Wu Kai's face was mysterious and then instigated everyone. Since we are so bored, why don't we have a grand treasure hunt? There are a few hundred spirit objects inside. If we are able to take one or two out, we will be rich. Spirit objects. It was normal for them to be annoyed. The Shang continent that they had seized was a wasteland. All of the citizens had long been evacuated, and all of the structures had been destroyed. Not even a complete house could be found. The Shang continent's estuary was too narrow, much less large-scale warships. Even medium-scale warships could not enter. In the 5 days that they had been in the Shang continent, 4 of them had been reigning with everyone's physique. They naturally did not need to worry about getting sick, but it had truly affected their mood. The situation was set. Cliff saw that Zeke had retracted his disdain and did not speak anymore. He turned and asked Ken, "Have you found the entrance to Heaven's Road? Might not be a star door." Zeke's mind was the fastest. He thought for a moment. There is a possibility that the star door is not on the ground or in the air. But in any case they had conquered the Shang continent, and after the continuous bitter battles, it caused everyone to be extremely tense and tired. At the moment they finally had the time to relax, and the 3 of them sat together sipping tea and relaxing their minds. Their expertise definitely did not include warship battles. If boss knows that they are soaking in the rain and you are looking for girls, oh, that scene is too beautiful, I do not dare to look at it. Wu Kai interrupted, his face full of exaggeration. With the help of the living spirits in Heaven's Road, they could quickly grow stronger, and the originally stronger Honorable Marshall Continent would leave the Southern Alliance far behind. The Honorable Marshall Continent had researched on spirits for many years, although they were unable to mass-produce living spirits, but they had found a way to use them. Chapter 863. With death nearing, the helplessness of the chaotic scene made the officers of the various armies choose to protect themselves without hesitation. The gigantic object with a diameter of 26 kilometers and a height of 13 kilometers brought forth a terrifying rumble as it crushed down, causing people to feel as though they had nowhere to run. The warship's power was pushed to its maximum, but the warship did not move an inch. Screams could be heard everywhere. Jing Hao tried to communicate with his divine sense. It was not smooth at the start, but Jing Hao was a tenacious man. Other than training, he spent the rest of his time communicating with the energy vortex. Ling Su and Crane were at the front lines and he was at the back and could not help at all. The energy vortex was quickly moving towards the location where the warships were anchored. Its stationary rotation was already terrifying enough, but when it moved, the pressure it brought about was simply suffocating. He did it silently and no one knew. When Bing decided to retreat from the Shang continent, he met with intense opposition, but when he understood Bing's strategy, he suggested a plan. The soldiers controlling the warship were panicking. They tried their best to control the warship to retreat, but the warship seemed to have fallen into a swamp. What made them even more discouraged was that they did not even dare to attack the energy vortex. The energy vortex, if it were to explode, would produce a might that could swallow the entire Shang continent. But the newly born spirits gradually accepted Jing Hao, and Jing Hao tried all sorts of methods such as entering the energy vortex. Everyone who was in a frenzy calmed down. His subordinate's voice trembled even more. "It seems to be moving towards us." The scene was extremely chaotic. Hundreds of star treasures were destroyed, but the living spirits did not disappear, but once again fused together, forming a brand new living spirit. Many people chose to abandon the ship. The corrosion of the sea of energy would not take their lives for the time being, so they had to save their lives first. They watched the gigantic object swagger about in a daze, completely unaware that the true fatal fangs were right behind them. The energy vortex at the Shang continent's estuary had long become a famous scenic spot in the Southern Alliance, and all the merchants and travelers would go there to take a look. It was the battle for the rise of the Southern Alliance, and the smoke and flames of that time had long dissipated, leaving only the energy vortex, which was as gorgeous as it was then. Every traveler who saw this energy whirlpool would be shocked by its shocking size. As the number of battleships was too large and the number of battleships was limited, the battleships were also berthed layer by layer. Many of the warships that were nearer to the center were desperately trying to rush out. Will it really work? Until one time he felt a strand of divine sense. He suddenly recalled that Tang Tian had once unintentionally mentioned to him that something seemed to be nurturing within this energy whirlpool. A shrill alarm rang throughout the fleet. He had to admit that when this idea was proposed, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. The state of the energy whirlpool was very stable. Wu Kai wasn't the only one who could see this. It was just that no one thought that there was a spirit object inside. The soldiers who were bored to death found a small warship and flew towards the energy whirlpool. Some people noticed the small warship, but no one dared to interfere. Other than patrolling units, there were not many restrictions on the movements of the other soldiers. Tight on the outside and loose on the inside. This way, everyone would be able to relax their strained nerves. The fatal temptation caused the restaurant to be filled with heavy breathing. Jing Hao's understanding towards star treasures was much deeper than others. The experienced crew members could tell with one look that the energy whirlpool in front of them was in a stable and safe state, and there was no danger. Wu Kai stared blankly at the energy whirlpool that was getting closer. He could not understand why the energy whirlpool's suction force would become stronger. It was obviously a stable energy whirlpool, and the period of stability for energy whirlpools was extremely long, usually over 1,000 years. How long has it been since the energy whirlpool was formed? When the Honorable Martial Continent's fleet arrived, everyone was shocked when they saw the energy whirlpool. For safety considerations, the position where the warships were anchored was specially maintained a distance from the energy whirlpool. Luckily, it was stable and its rotation speed was not fast and was extremely quiet. The various energy whirlpools in the Sea of Energy had always been the focus of the various large powerhouses, as it concerned the safety of the fleet. The Southern Alliance that personally created it, how powerful must it be? Oh my god, what's going on? Damn it! We are being sucked in. Suction force is becoming stronger. Suddenly someone exclaimed, "Stop! Quickly stop!" It was the symbol of the Southern Alliance's strength. The soldier controlling the warship replied loudly, "Hey buddy, relax, we have already stopped the ship." It had a diameter of 26 kilometers and a thickness of 13 kilometers. The only fortunate thing was that although the energy whirlpool was powerful, its speed could not be compared to the warships and it was not as agile. Quickly call for reinforcements. Their survival instincts and overly relaxed nerves caused them to lose effective command when the fleet encountered an unexpected situation. If Go Ching Wendao was there or any one of the three great generals, the situation would not have become so terrible. Without a commanding officer with authority to command, the warships that belonged to different armies were naturally in a state of chaos. Jing Hao's blood was boiling. He wanted to take action himself, but he knew that in terms of destructive power he was still lacking compared to the big bloc. No one knew that in the center of the gigantic energy whirlpool hundreds of star treasures were quietly floating, forming a sphere. And in the center of the sphere a figure wielding a sword stood in the void. It was Jing Hao. The fleet was in a mess. No one had ever seen such a strange and terrifying scene before. The majority of them had just awoken from their slumber. On every warship there were soldiers running around in panic, many of them in disarray. Seeing the sparse number of warships around them, everyone's faces became even worse. Upon being sucked into the energy whirlpool, any warship would only have one result. When the small-scale warships flew close to the energy whirlpool, everyone could not help but be attracted. Looking at the energy whirlpool up close, the feeling was completely different. From afar, the energy whirlpool didn't seem to be rotating very fast, but up close, the multicolored energy flow formed a wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. It carried a scalp-numbing screech as it flowed at high speed, its power terrifying. Wu Kai had seen through this point and thus brought up the idea. When he saw Ling Su and Crane's military general talent, it made Jing Hao envious. It was not that he was envious of military generals, but that they could fight and be of help to the situation. Crane and Ling Su were busy with training, although he could not help, but he did not stop training. The gigantic energy whirlpool slowly moved towards the location where the warships were anchored. But the slowness was only on the surface. Its size was extremely huge, causing it to move slowly, but in truth its speed was not slow at all. "What's wrong with the energy whirlpool?" he asked impatiently. To him it was definitely Wu Kai and the rest who were bored and caused an accident. In their vision they were getting closer and closer to the energy whirlpool. The energy flow that was like a gigantic wall in front of them was slowly closing in on them. Everyone was scared out of their wits. The small-scale warship's request for help was transmitted to the army that they were in, causing them to panic. He could not forget when Bing knew that he could control the energy whirlpool. His poker face was completely dumbstruck. "Advance, big guy." Even the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights could not do it, and that was why the officers were so relaxed. Bing's reaction was fast. He quickly perfected the plan and added in more details, causing it to become even more dangerous. Exclamations sounded out. The soldiers' confidence was shaken. Wu Kai's confidence was also shaken. Before they could even move out, they personally witnessed the small-scale warships being sucked into the energy whirlpool like leaves and then disappearing. In the chaos, the small-scale warships were in the worst situation, other than the smarter ones who relied on their agility to rush out first. The other small-scale warships, under the impact of the large-scale warships, were smashed into pieces. Retreat. Quickly retreat. Jing Hao held on to Drunk on Saint Blood and shouted towards the void. A strand of consciousness replied to him, and the energy whirlpool rumbled forward. Damn it! It's moving towards us? The officer was startled. It's too big. Damn it! I knew that this group of idiots were going to cause trouble. The brand new living spirit, due to the dense energy, grew at an astonishing speed. But when the warships that escaped saw the energy whirlpool crushing their previous position, and countless of broken wood and debris being sucked into the energy whirlpool, all of their faces turned pale white. Spirit objects to the soldiers were extremely far away, something that could be seen but not obtained. But they were clear of the value of spirit objects. No matter how low a grade spirit object was, it was still a treasure. Even if they were unable to keep it for themselves, selling it would definitely be enough for them to live comfortably. As long as they could obtain one, they might be able to immediately retire and enjoy the life of a tycoon. Master. His subordinate's anxious voice interrupted his thoughts. He raised his head and his subordinate's voice was trembling. Energy whirlpool. The short but nightmarish chaos had brought them heavy losses. Close to 70% of the small-scale warships, close to half of the medium-scale warships, and one large-scale warship. Such losses caused everyone to be speechless. The scouts had already spread out far, and the patrol team's area of patrol was extremely large. Even the slightest movement would not be able to escape their detection. It was an impossible task to sneak in under such tight security without anyone noticing. Jing Hao's intuition was not as sharp as Tang Tian's, but his knowledge foundation was much more solid and deep than Tang Tian's. Thinking back to the process of the energy whirlpool forming, he could roughly guess what was being nurtured inside the energy whirlpool. It was not that everyone had never seen larger energy whirlpools before, but the slowly rotating multicolored monster in front of them was a product of war, and was artificially formed. These words immediately caused everyone's faces to turn pale, and fear appeared in everyone's eyes. Encountering an energy whirlpool in the sea of energy, the most terrifying thing was to be sucked in by the energy whirlpool. Upon being unable to break free from the suction of the energy whirlpool, they would be sucked in. All the big and small warships were retreating with all their might, trying to break free. Wu Kai's direct subordinate officer scolded. His face was green. What is this? Accident? In the blink of an eye, my subordinates who are not fighting have been reduced by a few dozen. No matter what, he could not escape from the charge of lax supervision. Chapter 864. Crane opened his eyes. That pair of indifferent eyes was currently as cold as a blade. Beside him floated many light bubbles, and inside every bubble was a figure. All of their faces revealed traces of fatigue. They had been hiding in the undercurrent region for 5 days. Protective barrier. Quickly open the protective barrier. The crew members of the large warship were still in shock. They were anxious to escape and did not open the protective barrier. What was the use of the protective barrier? If they were to be sucked into the energy vortex, the protective barrier would not be able to save them. As for encountering other attacks, they had never thought about it. The warship suddenly broke apart. The light aura of the star treasures quickly became even brighter. The energy vortex was actually controlled by the enemy. Are they looking to die? Wei Tingting clenched her teeth without hesitation. She gathered all her remaining strength and rushed forward. But they could not blame the officers of the fleet. They had no problems with their tactics. The Shang continent's terrible terrain was the true culprit. The Shang continent was just a small and remote continent, and did not possess the conditions to anchor such a large fleet. They were like fish in water, destroying the warships and reaping lives. Just at that moment, a dazzling light regiment suddenly lit up outside the window. The piercing light aura caused the entire sky to turn white and nothing could be seen. The loud explosion caused everyone to be unable to hear anything. Everyone was dumbfounded and their minds went blank. Bang! A cry of surprise sounded out, causing the atmosphere to become tense again. Everyone was stunned by the scene. How could a large-scale warship be so weak? Little Fool, who had been forced to go crazy by the refinement, was currently on the verge of going berserk. Every time, Bing would sigh with emotion at how good of a child he was, and would continue to destroy and exploit him. No one noticed them. The soldiers on the warship were all focused on the energy vortex. It was the order to retreat. The intense pain on their bodies caused them to wake up. Spread out. All of you spread out. Their attacks were extremely ferocious, without any intention of conserving their strength. Crane and the rest had discussed in detail before the battle, deducing all sorts of situations and how to deal with them. The situation in front of them did not exceed their expectations. Their movements were concealed and careful. Borrowing the shadows of the warship, they stuck close to the bottom of the ship. The terrifying dazzling light aura lit up again. This time it was even more ferocious. The experienced crew members knew that the attack was coming from a few places at the same time. Their heads buzzed as if they had been punched in the head. Large battleships and other large battleships. When Go Qingwendao seized control of the Shang continent, he immediately surveyed the surrounding terrain, and naturally found the undercurrent region near the estuary. There was no doubt about the danger of the undercurrent zone. No matter how powerful a fleet was, they would have no chance of survival if they accidentally charged into the undercurrent zone. Wei Tingting and the rest were also frightened by the power of the star treasure bomb. Countless people woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They held their heads in their hands and looked as if they had seen a ghost. The fleet's plan was to be tight on the outside and loose on the inside. The sudden movement of the energy vortex caught everyone off guard. However, the real reason for such great destruction was because the battleships were too densely packed and encountered an unexpected situation that caused chaos. The destructive power of the energy whirlpool was astonishing, but its speed was naturally much slower than a warship. If the battleships were not so densely packed, most of the battleships could easily avoid the danger. The people on the remaining battleships stared dumbfoundedly at the suicidal actions of these people. No, this is impossible. Their primary target was the large warships. But after lying dormant in the undercurrent zone for 5 days, their physical strength had been greatly depleted, and the remaining physical strength was only enough for them to unleash a wave of high-intensity attacks. The battleships that survived the calamity watched as the energy vortex wreaked havoc. All of them had miserable expressions. With such a huge accident, everyone was doomed, and what awaited them was Master Go Qingwendao's rage. Master Go Qingwendao, who was widely known for his coldness and strictness, under his rage how many people would lose their lives? Wei Tingting and the rest were the first to react and immediately launched attacks on the medium-scale warships. Screams and exclamations sounded out. The fleet that had just calmed down once again fell into chaos. If Go Qingwendao's fleet suffered heavy losses, Go Qingwendao would be in an extremely dangerous situation. In the undercurrent zone 150 m behind them, Wei Tingting released the last god gold arrow. Upon leaving the bow, it transformed into a ray of light like a shooting star. It smashed into one of the medium-scale warships. For 5 days they maintained their silence and no one said a word. They were too close to the enemy. If they made any movements, they might attract the enemy's attention and the entire plan would fail. Furthermore, the battle was not over yet. Wei Tingting was equally excited, but she was much more experienced than before, and proficiently pulled out the god gold arrow. Crane did not give any orders. All of the details had been discussed over and over again, and everyone knew what they had to do. All of them were dumbstruck, their mouths were wide open and they could not close them. Now they finally understood why they needed to escape 3 kilometers away before the explosion. Seeing the warships that were destroyed by the shockwave, if they had stayed in the area, all that would be left would be a pile of minced meat. The large-scale warships were extremely sturdy, and ordinary attacks were unable to destroy them. At that time, no one knew better than Crane and the rest how sturdy the warship wreckages were. How to destroy the large-scale warships became the biggest problem they had to face. The clear Crane cry resonated throughout the battlefield. Even the explosions were unable to cover it. Using the spirit-devouring flame as the trigger, the star treasure self-detonation was the star treasure bomb. Its might was extremely astonishing, and was the best weapon to use against large-scale warships. For the battle, the Southern Alliance used all of their remaining star treasures. A large-scale warship was engulfed by the light aura, and a spherical shockwave suddenly expanded outwards. The warships around it were like paper in front of the shockwave. The hull of the warships were forcibly shaken into many pieces. The narrow estuary caused the majority of the warships to be anchored near the Shang continent's estuary. But even the space near the estuary was extremely limited. The gigantic energy vortex occupied one side. And on the other side was the extremely dangerous undercurrent region. No one would have thought that it was just the beginning. That is Master Go Qing Wendao's warship. The battle plan was drawn up and the powerful large-scale warships were set as the main target. Everyone suddenly realized a problem that they had overlooked. How could they destroy the large-scale warships? The Shang continent had no defenses, and without a fleet, Go Qing Wendao was like a warrior that had lost his armor. A dazzling flame blossomed from the center of the warship. Regiment after regiment of flames blossomed like beautiful flowers that blossomed in the fleet. The battle was so sudden and intense. The honorable Martial Continent's fleet that was not prepared at all suffered heavy losses. They crawled up frantically and looked towards the direction of the explosion, but when they saw it clearly, all of them were stunned. The surviving warships had their backs to the undercurrent region, and the warship closest to the buoy line was only 150 m away. They stuck a star treasure to the bottom of the warship and immediately distanced themselves. According to the data given by Little Fool, they needed to rush out of 3 kilometers before it exploded. They appeared from behind the fleet like ghosts. The battlefield that was filled with smoke and raging flames rushed out like black dots. They were like birds returning to their nests, rushing towards the energy vortex. The Star Treasure Bomb's effect was too good, so good that it exceeded their expectations, which meant that they had already achieved the lowest goal of the plan. With the destruction of the large-scale warships, the fleet's fighting strength had dropped by more than half. Then an even more unbelievable scene occurred. To prevent any accidents, they had specially set up the eye-catching buoy line to mark the undercurrent region. Looking deeply at the young faces that were filled with excitement, Crane did not speak any nonsense. He unsheathed his sword and took the lead to rush towards the border of the undercurrent region. Behind him the others followed closely. There's a sneak attack. Even with the protection of star treasures, staying in the undercurrent region for 5 days was an extreme test of willpower and strength. Crane did not know if they could survive for 5 days in the undercurrent region. But he still accepted the mission because he knew that it was the only chance to heavily injure Go Qing Wendao's fleet. The intense energy undulation immediately alerted the crew members of the fleet. After the lingering fear, they quickly became excited. For the sake of the battle, the Southern Alliance had used all of their good stuff. The God Gold arrows were useless against large-scale warships, but against medium-scale warships, they were able to cause damage. Wei Ting and the rest were already familiar with how to deal with warships. Furthermore, the complicated and chaotic environment was no different from when they were in the wreckage zone. Dazzling light auras blossomed from the fleet. All of them were large-scale warships. The snow-white light auras enveloped the entire battlefield. After a short sprint, everyone's vision suddenly became bright. Damn it! It's rushing towards us. Everyone started to wake their companions up and moved their stiff bodies. For the sake of reducing their losses for the 5 days, they did not move at all. Go Qing Wendao's warship, the most luxurious, sturdiest, strongest with the strongest offense and the tightest defense, was left with only half of the jet-black wreckage. Gigantic tongues of flames spewed out from the wreckage, burning fiercely. The few warships around it were affected and suffered severe damage. When they had decided to carry out the plan, they knew that if they succeeded, the battle would become a legend. And the enemy was the honorable Martial Continent, that had a blood feud with them. To use such a legendary method to heavily injure their enemy, there was nothing more exciting than that. When the explosions outside came out, everyone who was already numb gradually regained their vigor, and their stiff faces became excited. It was the most crucial battle. The energy vortex revealed a crack that was roughly 1 kilometer wide, and the enemies that had escaped from the battlefield all flew into the crack. When the last enemy flew into the crack closed up. Crane and the rest managed to sneak into the bottom of the large-scale warship. The gigantic hull of the large-scale warship cast a deep shadow, giving them the best cover. It was their secret weapon, the Star Treasure Bomb. Everyone fell into fear and most of them wanted to cry but had no tears. However, everyone's faces were filled with excitement. What entered their vision were many gigantic warships. They looked to be in a mess, without any formation to speak of. The flames that blossomed from time to time, the terrifying figures in the energy vortex, became the best background. Jing Hao had launched his attack. Wei Ting bit her lips. Her hands were trembling slightly due to overexertion. Her expression was filled with unwillingness. If I had more time. The star treasure suddenly released a faint flame. It was the spirit-devouring flame. The star treasure immediately became bright and started to frantically absorb the energy around it. Before they could react, the body of the warship beneath them suddenly trembled. They were caught off guard and were flung out, smashing onto the wall. The one who solved the problem was Little Fool. Chapter 865. At that moment, all the answers were revealed. The Southern Alliance did not prepare any path of retreat. They did not have any reinforcements. Their goal was to rush into the undercurrent region. All of the military generals of the Honorable Martial Continent had ashen faces, their eyes spewing fire. The destructive power of the energy vortex was astonishing, but its speed was much slower than a warship. Coupled with its huge size, it was exceptionally easy to aim. For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He seemed to see countless killing intents, but he couldn't grasp them. Too slow. The soldier's voice trembled. Should we fight back? When the last fragment disappeared, all the surviving warships became alert. They knew that the enemy was going to retreat. They can help us divert the Southern Alliance's attention. We only have one mission before Moxn and Chiu Su Hua are exhausted. We need to find the passage. If we find it, we win. If we can't find it, we'll all die together. Up until now, everyone who was still alive had a ball of anger in their hearts. Right now they only wanted to vent this ball of anger. Maybe the Southern Alliance had arranged for reinforcements along the way, but so what? When was the last time he was in such a sorry state? The large siege ships had been destroyed. Cliff could even roughly guess what the other party would do next. Surround them and attack the reinforcements. But even if he knew, he couldn't do anything about it. This was an overt plot. They were in enemy territory and had a long supply line. Whether it was supplies or reinforcements, the price was huge. On the other hand, the other party's entire population was a soldier, and they had all the advantages. Too vexing and too aggrieved. The battlefield regained its tranquility. On the surviving warships, be it the soldiers or officers, all of them seemed to have lost all their strength. They sat on the ground looking defeated. What a terrifying fellow. The Knight of Light has been killed. However, only 30% of the medium-sized warships remained. When Go Ching Wendao rushed over, seeing the sparse warships, his face immediately became ashen, his cheeks twitched and the rage in his eyes throbbed like flames. Everyone who was familiar with him knew that he was going to kill someone. Soon he was no longer smiling bitterly, but his mouth was filled with bitterness. What else is there to burn? Throw it in. Counterattack. Of course he had to counterattack. Putting aside the shock and pain in his heart, Cliff began to think about how such a heavy loss would affect the situation of the war. To dare to give up on the Shang continent, it was truly a decisiveness worthy of praise. From the start of this battle, the other side began to gain the strategic initiative. Wait a minute. The Southern Alliance's attack was too ruthless. Everyone on the Radiant Martial warship who was prepared to fight to the death was dumbstruck. Inside the Western Trader's warehouse, the courtyard was ablaze. Everyone was continuously removing all sorts of flammable items and throwing them into the fire. Utter defeat. The energy whirlpool slowly swept through the wreckage. The floating debris and the hull of the ship disappeared without a trace. It was like a beast that had eaten and drunk its fill, looking lazy. The fire isn't big enough. One more round. The undercurrent area. Yes. Cliff's heart skipped a beat. I will immediately request for reinforcements from the Holy Cathedral. These incomparably proud generals had already thrown their personal honor and disgrace to the back of their minds. In the face of such humiliation, life and death were meaningless. They could only hope to regain some of their dignity. In the night, Blue Wind City was in chaos, where the Western Traders' encampment was ablaze. The blazing flames lit up the sky. Even from afar, one could feel the ferocity of the fire. The energy whirlpool was a secret weapon, and they were extremely familiar with the group that ambushed them. They were their old opponents in the wreckage. Regardless of who it was, the Southern Alliance would not treat them as sacrificial pawns, so they would definitely retreat. Everyone's opinion was unanimous. They had to get rid of the energy whirlpool. Whether it was to wash away the humiliation or for the safety of the supply line, no matter what, they had to get rid of the energy whirlpool. The remaining captains were in an intense discussion. But what surprised them was that Go Ching Wendao became quiet. The rage in his eyes dimmed down, and a bitter smile blossomed on his face. But they could only watch with their eyes wide open. There was nothing they could do. They could only wait for the enemy to retreat, wait for them to explode. They will definitely retreat. They quickly came up with a plan. The speed of the warships was much faster than the energy whirlpool and more agile. The energy whirlpool will definitely not be able to escape. Damn it! Without the protection of the warships, the Shang continent was exposed to the Southern Alliance, and could be attacked at any time. The Shang continent was small and did not have any strategic depth, and more importantly, Temple would definitely not allow them to leave the Shang continent. The only thing they could do was to defend and seek reinforcements. Cliff could not help but laugh bitterly. If even the Western traders can't defend against it, how can they even have the heart to fight back? Suddenly, Cliff had some suspicions. Is giving up on the Shang continent intentional? A cold intent surfaced in his heart. If that is truly the case, follow it, and when it retreats we will kill it. The Southern Alliance is actually able to control the energy whirlpool. Such a secret weapon is truly a huge threat. The fleet suffered a devastating blow. All of the large-scale warships were destroyed, 90% of the small-scale warships were destroyed, and only a few medium-scale warships were left. Screams and shouts filled the ears, spreading out at an astonishing speed in the night, causing the various construction sites to explode. Blue Wind City was currently a gigantic construction site. For the sake of rebuilding Blue Wind City, the Western traders had gathered all of the reputable trading organizations in the Western region. The bandits are here. Go Qing Wendao, who was silent for a long time, spat out 3 words with difficulty. Seek reinforcements. The direction the energy whirlpool is moving in. The officers finally calmed down. The military generals of the Honorable Martial Continent did not need to worry about their tactics. And for all of them to be able to become Go Qing Wendao's subordinates, all of them were not weak. Especially the captains of the warships, all of them were experienced military generals with high standards. After a series of intense and unconventional attacks, they gradually reacted. The enemy wants to kill us all. Unknowingly, the battle had fallen into the enemy's rhythm. Cliff knew that even if the fleet was not attacked and they were not in such a terrible situation, but the battle would still slowly fall into the enemy's rhythm. Be careful, don't burn the warehouse. The best way was to take the initiative to retreat from the Shang continent and regain the strategic space. But he knew that Temple would definitely not agree. The true target of the southern expedition was the Shang continent. Half of the energy whirlpool had already entered the undercurrent region. The outer layer of the energy whirlpool had an additional layer of black barrier, which was spinning at a high speed. This is a huge humiliation. They then thought about it. The enemy's sneak attack came from the undercurrent region. The enemy has been lying in ambush in the undercurrent region for at least 5 days. They have a way to survive in the undercurrent region. They had lost the initiative in their strategy. The only thing they had to worry about was the explosion of the energy whirlpool, which would cause the Shang continent to be destroyed. Go Qing Wendao and the 3 great generals were all in the Shang continent, and if the energy whirlpool exploded there, the Shang continent would not be spared. Even if the Shang continent was safe and sound, if the estuary was destroyed, the situation would be equally terrible. Cliff could not help but feel a sense of respect towards the commander of the Southern Alliance, whom he had never met before. If not for the fleet being attacked, they would never have thought that the Shang continent was abandoned by the enemy, and even Master Go Qing Wendao was deceived. It was truly powerful. The surviving officers regained their senses from the shock. Their eyes suddenly filled with blood veins. When have we ever suffered such a huge loss? In the history of the Honorable Martial Continent, it was the first time that such a large-scale fleet was destroyed. The energy whirlpool brought along a scalp-numbing roar as it smashed towards them. The Southern Alliance was like their nemesis. Since the start of the battle, other than the slight advantage they had over the Southern Alliance in the beginning, the situation had never happened again. The Southern Alliance's resistance became more and more tenacious, and the standards of the enemy's military generals became higher and higher, causing the Honorable Martial Continent's losses to increase. However, a situation like this where the entire fleet was almost annihilated was unprecedented. In the battlefield, the most tragic thing was not that the enemy had the absolute advantage and you could only fight with your life on the line, but that the enemy did not even give you the chance to fight and you would be completely defeated. When the energy whirlpool pounced over, the surviving warships quickly dodged like nimble fishes. To avoid being sucked in by the energy whirlpool, they maintained a distance. They did not even take the initiative to occupy the direction where the energy whirlpool retreated, to prevent the energy whirlpool from being unable to retreat, and choosing to perish together. Cliff knew that his master had truly suffered a huge blow. Go Qingwendao had become famous at a young age. His military achievements were illustrious, although he had lost before, but his fighting strength was extremely strong, and even if he lost, the one in a difficult situation would be the enemy. Cliff sighed. He even hoped that he did not understand. Other than the arrangements that could be seen, the enemy definitely had other plans, just that he could not understand their intentions. They had rich battle experience and were previously caught unprepared, adding that they lacked a unified command. But now that they were prepared to die, they did not have many misgivings and quickly found the weakness of the energy whirlpool. But when they saw the energy whirlpool like a grinder, devouring everything in the wreckage of the warships, everyone's eyes turned red once again. They were so angry that they were about to pop out. There were many survivors in the wreckage of the warships. But now, regardless of whether it was the warships, the corpses, or the survivors, they were all being devoured by the energy whirlpool. Go Qingwendao's voice was like the winter wind, causing everyone's entire body to turn cold. Cliff was startled. He immediately understood something and his face turned pale white. Inside the warehouse, young lad Tang heard everyone's shouts in the courtyard, and looked at the mountains of warehouses in front of him. He was dumbstruck. Their situation had become difficult. Cliff never thought that after they took over the Shang continent, their situation would become more and more difficult. They watched helplessly as the energy vortex entered the undercurrent area and disappeared. No. Go Qingwendao's voice seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. It was extremely cold. Other than Temple, there is still Moxen and Qiu Su Hua. Tell them to rush to the Shang continent at full speed. The darkness and flames caused the fear in the depths of their hearts to transform into instincts, urging them to escape frantically. Everyone did not delay for time and quickly made their decision. All of the warships that had the determination to die had already disregarded life and death. They only wanted to fight without caring about anything else. To die under the gunfire and smoke, to die in the midst of fighting with the enemy, was far more satisfying than dying without even knowing why. Chapter 866. The Bronze Grade Spirit General card was of a low grade. The bronze door of the spirit chamber flashed, and a spirit general appeared in front of Tang Tian. Paipa was surprised. Tang Tian then tried to use it to move things and realized that its strength was not bad and was immediately satisfied. Qiu Su Hua knew that if this continued, the situation would only become worse. In just 3 hours they had emptied the entire warehouse. The spirit chamber was still the same. The simple and crude bronze door stood there quietly. He only had one mission, and that was to kill Moxen. The large amount of resources from the New World had profoundly changed the two worlds of Heaven's Road and Sacred Saint Galaxy. The next step was extremely crucial, and if he missed it, it would be impossible for him to obtain such an opportunity again. He had tried using all sorts of methods to deal with Baiyu. Even if he had to suffer some losses, he was willing. Who knew that Baiyu was too crafty and slippery? Every time he would swallow the bait and spit out the hook. There were a few times when he was about to succeed, but every time he would slip away at the last moment. Baiyu's high standard made Qiu Su Hua admire him, and he even thought of recruiting Baiyu to be his subordinate after winning the battle. When he regained his senses, he immediately felt an intense fear. Now it was time to test him. Tang Tian's eyes released a green light. Like a famished wolf, he stared at the mountain of resources in front of him. No one would believe that Go Qingwendao would fail so miserably. Hearing the explosions behind him getting further and further away, and seeing the figures disappearing out of the window, Qiu Su Hua could no longer hold it in and his tears fell silently. On the surface, it looked like a large army of warships had been destroyed, but the effect it had on the entire battle was fundamental. Yaya, who had always been in a daze upon seeing Tang Tian, became overjoyed and babbled non-stop, causing Tang Tian to feel guilty, as though he had forgotten about him for too long. When Tang Tian explained everything to Yaya, Yaya patted his chest loudly, and then pulled out his mechanical beast army. Sima Xiao had traveled with Tang Tian for a long time, but he still felt that it was hard to understand the ignorant and naive young man. Whether it was greed or calmness, they were both so real, but the transformation was so sudden. After a while he suddenly realized that the appearance of the spirit generals would have a profound effect on the two worlds. Previously, although Tang Tian had the stargate that connected the two worlds, his transportation ability was extremely limited. It was like a thin blood vessel that could only transport a limited amount of resources. With the appearance of all these spirit generals, it meant that the blood transfusion tube had expanded by 100 or even 1,000 times, and the amount of resources that could be transported between the two worlds had become extremely astonishing. Tang Tian, whose eyes were glowing with a green light, stared blankly at the dazzling high-grade materials in the warehouse like a statue. At first, Xieyuan had some doubts about this quest, but he didn't ask much. Instead he carried it out seriously. Until yesterday, when the news of Goqing Wendao's fleet being destroyed came, he finally realized. We don't have much time, Qima Xiao reminded. The quantity was too astonishing, and not many people could maintain their calm in front of such wealth. Just the blood tear gems alone, there were 7 boxes, and its value far exceeded the warehouse that they had plundered previously. A large number of materials rich in Saint Crystal were piled up into a dazzling hill. Thus, when Tang Tian brought the majestic mechanical beasts and spirit generals back to the Western trader's warehouse, everyone was dumbstruck. Xieyuan was extremely busy, but the upcoming battle made him excited and excited. It also meant that the two worlds were about to truly merge. The 07 army barracks that he had not visited for a long time was still the same, with the vicissitudes of time and desolation. The Western traders needed to construct an even more majestic Blue Wind city, and required even more high-grade materials. Unable to give up on the wealth, pressed for time, Tang Tian seemed to have fallen into a desperate situation. His pitiful intelligence was currently operating frantically. That's right, he had the idea of the spirit generals. I have no other choice. Tang Tian's voice broke Sima Zhao's train of thought, and he could not help but look at Tang Tian. His eyes are so clear. Where is the greedy green wolf that looked like a greedy wolf? Qiu Su Hua stared at Wei Yu for a long time, his heart filled with sorrow before the battle. Who would have thought that the battle would be so intense? Out of the 3 generals under him, Feng Yunman had already been sacrificed, and now with the addition of Wei Yu, only Ziche Jiajing was left. There is strength in numbers. Sima Xiao held on to the stupefied Carl and followed closely behind. So it was like that. Tang Tian thought about Tang Yi and Tang Chou, and his mouth unknowingly blossomed into a smile. Time was of the essence. He did not have the time to reminisce, but moved quickly and used the bronze-grade spirit cards in the spirit hall. Seeing the warehouse that was so clean that not even a piece of paper was left, as though there was a plague of locusts, everyone could not help but tremble. Master is too ruthless. Ursa Major Constellation's strength was no longer the same as it was in the past, with saints representing the high-end fighting strength, and martial artists who trained in the zero-energy bodies, firmly held the core strength of Ursa Major Constellation. The need for spirit cards had drastically decreased, and the warehouse was filled with large amounts of spirit cards. He was completely in awe of Master Bing and could not understand how the master managed to do it. Sima Xiao suddenly felt that he was rather fortunate to be able to personally witness such a historical moment. They had to use all methods to snipe Mo Xin and delay Mo Xian's retreat. Wei Yu led his troops and rushed out. The majority of the troops took the chance to break free and quickly escaped. Tang Tian had never thought of giving up on the materials. Although Tang Tian was a tyrant at times, but to give up on so much wealth was definitely not his style. He knew how important the following plan was, but he knew even more clearly that upon starting the following plan, they would never be able to return to Blue Wind City. His entire body was brimming with fighting spirit. Sima Xiao was dumbstruck. Control, I must definitely control myself, Sima Xiao muttered in his heart. To him, the wealth in front of him could make anyone go crazy, but the initiative and strategy was even more precious. This godlike young lad who has created so many miracles must definitely be able to differentiate the severity of the situation. Prepare to move out. The intense battle lit up the sea of energy. Bai Yu was like a dog skin plaster, thinking of all ways to pester him. Both parties had crossed swords countless of times, and were extremely familiar with each other. Compared to the aged Sacred Pagoda army, Bai Yu was extremely agile, causing Qiu Su Hua to have a bigger headache. 3 Spirits City. Tang Tian's sudden appearance immediately made Pai Pa anxious. She thought that something had happened. But what she did not expect was that Tang Tian needed spirit cards. After quickly replenishing his army, he received a secret mission and quietly left the Southern Alliance. Tang Tian tried to command the spirit general. Its movements were rather stiff and its reaction was slow. Could only accept some simple commands. Go Qing Wendao saw that they were gradually losing the initiative, and thus personally requested for help from Qiu Su Hua. Qiu Su Hua did not hesitate and immediately set off towards the Shang continent. But Bai Yu was like a dog skin plaster. He pounced forward frantically and continued to pester them, causing the fleet's speed to drop. After serving as the recruitment ambassador for a period of time, he had achieved great results, but he was not used to living a life far away from the battlefield. Fortunately, Bing would definitely not throw such an outstanding military general to the back and not care about him. Wei Yu Qiu Su Hua's left and right arm had a resolute expression. The honorable martial continent would never have thought that the goal that they had fought for generations at this moment, would be quietly opened by the hands of a young man. What Tang Tian and the rest did not know was that although the people of the sacred Saint Galaxy did not refine out Saint crystals, they did not know nothing about them. Materials that were rich in Saint crystals would usually display extremely bright properties, and most of these materials were high-grade materials. And in the core regions of the cities, the keels of the warships and other crucial regions, high-grade materials were used in large amounts. All of the warships were almost completely wiped out. The flames in the courtyard lit up the sky, and also lit up Sima Zhao's face of shock. Looking at the empty warehouse and the dumbfounded crowd, he couldn't help but laugh. Even Tang Tian himself did not realize that in the night where the flames soared to the sky, a brand new era had quietly begun. Qiu Su Hua stared out of the window seemingly in a daze. Sima Zhao knew the value of Saint crystals. With so many high-grade materials, the amount of Saint crystals contained would cause anyone to go crazy. But according to the plan, they did not have much time left. What made Pai Pa even more surprised was that Tang Tian actually chose the lowest grade spirit card, the bronze grade spirit card. A torch was thrown into the empty warehouse, and the warehouse immediately turned into a sea of flames. Spirit card? Just as Sima Zhao was about to persuade him again, Tang Tian suddenly slapped his head, his eyes lit up. I have an idea. Qiu Su Hua could not forget the disbelief he felt when he received Go Qing Wendao's request for help. He could not believe his own eyes. He was extremely clear of Go Qing Wendao's standard. The 5 great generals all had different styles, but their standards were all about the same. Other than producing a batch of bronze-grade spirit generals, Tang Tian even brought Yaya over. Luckily, although Qiu Su Hua could not do anything to Bai Yu similarly could not do anything to Qiu Su Hua, and the two of them maintained a strange tacit understanding. But the request for help was personally sent by Go Qing Wendao, and he explained the cause and effect of their failure in detail. After reading it, Qiu Su Hua's mind was in a daze, and only regained his senses after an hour. For the sake of rebuilding Blue Wind City, the Western traders had prepared a large amount of resources. To rebuild a city, and furthermore one that was even more majestic than Blue Wind City, the amount of resources required was astronomical, and no one expected for Tang Tian to benefit from it. I need someone to cover my back, Qiu Su Hua said solemnly, his gaze sweeping across the generals. He was slightly worried that Tang Tian would be delayed because of the wealth. What a joke. Because it was a bronze-grade spirit card, the spirit hall transformed it into the lowest-grade spirit general. Its aura was extremely weak, its face seemed to be shrouded in mist, it did not have a physical body, but its limbs were much more congealed. But this strange tacit understanding was broken after receiving Go Qing Wendao's request for help. Truly an unfathomable fellow. He did not understand why the situation had unknowingly become so terrible. Let's go. Tang Tian soared into the sky. This subordinate is willing to go. A sturdy-looking man stepped out. He did not pick anyone. It was a mission of certain death and there was almost no chance of survival. But he had no other choice. If they could not break free from Bai Yu, they would not be able to reinforce the Shang continent in time. The longer they dragged on, the more passive they would be. Out of all of them, the only one who could maintain his composure in front of the astonishing wealth was the Scorpio King. The last time Tang Tian emptied out the warehouse, he had spent an entire night, and compared to the resources in front of him, the amount of resources in the warehouse was negligible. For the Western traders to transport so many resources here, they had spent countless manpower and resources, and for them to move all of them was undoubtedly a gigantic task. Chapter 867. Unknowingly, he had already reached a height that was previously unimaginable. When he received Go Qing Wendao's request for help, his initial advantage became a huge disadvantage. After thinking of the strategy, Xie Yuan marked all the possible routes that Mo Xian could take to the Shang continent. He personally went to the various continents to persuade them, and organized the local armies to build fortifications. The sea of energy was vast and boundless. Other than those that had already been opened up, there were still many regions that no one had set foot on. However, these unfamiliar areas were filled with unknown dangers. This was the fourth battle since the day before yesterday. The intensity of the battle was not high, and the opponent's fighting spirit did not seem to be tenacious. They were only resisting with the help of the fortifications. Most of the battle was spent on destroying the fortifications. When the defensive structure collapsed, the enemy army scattered. It was obvious that they were just a group of mobs. He was now the most famous military general in the southern region. In the southern region, many people did not know who the highest commander of the Southern Alliance was, but there was no one who did not know of Xie Yuan's success, and fame did not cause him to lose himself. The life and death battle in the Ocean Guardian stronghold had left an unerasable mark in his heart. Life and death, so tragic, so cruel. He survived, but so many of his companions were forever separated, and it was the greatest loss the Swift Army had ever suffered since its formation. But continuously encountering mobs still aroused Mo Xian's vigilance. Mo Xian stared at the battlefield that had just ended as a dark cloud flashed across her heart. Some continents even doubled the number of fortifications Xie Yuan had given them. Abundant manpower and material resources allowed the entire plan to be carried out quickly. Previously, although Xie Yuan did not reject the recruitment ambassador, he still had some resentment in his heart. He was an introverted person who liked to be quiet. He didn't really like things like standing in front of the stage. However, as a soldier he had to obey orders unconditionally, so he worked hard to do a better job. He had personally forced Mo Xian to such a state. The various continents of the southern region were all cheering. In their eyes, Mo Xian was dead for sure. After encountering the 15th fortification, Mo Xian's army suddenly changed direction. Mo Xian decided to take a different path. Although she would have to take a detour when she thought about the densely packed fortifications that made people despair, taking a detour would save more time. Xie Yuan did not know whether he had completed the mission or not. Mo Xian's army had no choice but to spend a lot of time to dismantle it. Xie Yuan calmed himself down. He wasn't too happy, but he wasn't too depressed either. The other party was not a mediocre fighter. On the contrary, he was one of the few famous generals in the world. He had his own dignity and courage. But when that familiar fortification once again entered Mo Xian's field of vision, it was as if Mo Xian was struck by lightning, his entire person dumbstruck. The affluence of the southern region was now on full display. Xie Yuan's crazy plan had received the complete support of all the continents. However, he had already done all he could and had done everything he could. If his swift army was unscathed, he would definitely take the chance to tail the enemy and look for an opportunity. The current swift army was not strong enough to complete such a difficult mission. His initial mission was to attract the southern region's attention and prevent the southern region's power from converging towards the Southern Alliance. He had accomplished his mission quite successfully. He was invincible and no one could stop him. He had penetrated deep into the heart of the southern mountain range, causing great unease in the southern mountain range. He had attracted the attention of the entire southern mountain range. To gain the trust of so many continents' local armies was not an easy task, but Xie Yuan did it. Just based on this alone, Xie Yuan was quite amazing. Such a simple and crude method of accumulating numbers. Mo Xian suddenly realized that he actually did not have any good ideas. Even though he did not like the recruitment work, he still gave it his all, and his footprints covered every single recruitment point. Being pragmatic and taciturn did not lower his prestige, but instead allowed him to gain even more praise. The initially empty waterway was now filled with densely packed fortifications, becoming an extremely strange scenery. When Xie Yuan received the news, he could not help but feel respect for Mo Xian. In such a situation, to make such a choice required immense courage and responsibility. To use his own life to gamble for a chance to change the situation, such a commander was worthy of respect. Mo Xin had no choice but to arrange for a few people to watch over them, and their speed of advancement became even slower. But Mo Xin knew that he had no other choice. Mo Xin could never imagine how crazy Xie Yuan was. The grade of the fortifications were not high and looked to be crudely made. It was obvious that the enemy had rushed it in a short period of time. The sturdiness of these fortifications, however, was far more trustworthy than they appeared to be. The rest could only be left to the heavens. After encountering the 8th fortification, Mo Xin completely understood Xie Yuan's intentions. Mo Xin laughed at himself at such a time. What need was there for him to care about himself? After regaining his senses, Mo Xin ordered his army to continue advancing in disbelief. After encountering 4 identical fortifications in a row, he completely despaired. Furthermore, the crudely made yet sturdy fortifications made Mo Xin think of a man, Xie Yuan. The densely packed fortifications on the waterway caused Mo Xin to be in despair. It was already impossible to return through the waterway. Xie Yuan's move was truly unsolvable. With such a pressing time, with such speed, they would not be able to reach the Shang continent even next year. Deep into the center of the southern region, the return journey seemed to be extremely long. But he had no other choice and could only give the order to retreat. And the distance between Mo Xian's position and the Shang continent was extremely far, as though they had to traverse half of the southern region, causing him to be in despair. Mo Xian's army deviated from the waterway and disappeared into the endless darkness. There was only one way in front of Mo Xin to avoid the waterway. He was silent, digesting and working hard. On their path there were many more fortifications. Every fortification had become a sniping point. But he could see the light of victory. Xie Yuan's reputation had played an extremely crucial role. If the local armies were to risk their lives, they would definitely not be willing, but it was just building fortifications and borrowing the fortifications to defend. Once the fortifications were breached, they could freely choose to retreat, and the local armies were extremely willing. His gaze regained clarity. The various continents of the southern region hated the honorable martial continent from the bottom of their hearts. They did not have the courage to directly go to the front lines, but they only needed to spend some money to make the honorable martial continent suffer, so what was there to hesitate about? That's right, it was time. Mo Xin had to admit that Xie Yuan was definitely a famous general. The plan looked simple, but it required the commander to have a convincing reputation and strong organizational capabilities, and the entire plan involved too many armies. He guessed that the Southern Alliance would definitely obstruct them from supporting Go Qing Wendao, so when they encountered resistance he was not surprised. But in such a short period of time, they had encountered 4 battles consecutively, and all of them were the same, causing him to feel uneasy. Truly a powerful man. Mo Xin immediately felt the passion of the various continents of the southern region. Man proposes, God disposes, everything that needs to be done has been done. Xie Yuan thought of an extremely brazen idea. Some of the continents even started to bet on whose house Mo Xin would pass by. And the continents that had their fortifications destroyed by Mo Xin were even more pleased with themselves, and had extremely proud looks on their faces. The continents that Mo Xin had yet to visit took the chance to build more fortifications, as though they wanted to block the waterways. One might be a coincidence, but 4 was definitely not a coincidence. Xie Yuan wanted to use the method of fencing, using the fortifications and the local armies of the nearby continents to slow down their footsteps. The fortifications were unable to stop them from retreating, but it would greatly waste their time. After admiring Xie Yuan, Mo Xian's heart started to ache. This road is also fenced. Until now, when Xie Yuan's guess was proven, everyone's passion was ignited. His army would be safe and sound if they traveled the waterways, but by the time they arrived it would be too late. If they did not travel the waterways, the army would face countless of unknown dangers, but there was a possibility of obtaining reinforcements. Xie Yuan had already proven how proficient he was in constructing fortifications in the Ocean Guardian stronghold, and in terms of designing fortifications he had the highest standard. How to delay Mo Xian's reinforcements was something that Xie Yuan had always been thinking about. Although the swift army had been replenished and the quality of the new recruits were extremely high, but to form a fighting strength they still required time. Why are there also? The standard of the armies stationed in the fortifications were rather average, and different fortifications had different armies, So Moxn judged that they should be the local armies of the nearby continents. These armies only had one mission, and that was to rely on the fortifications to defend. As long as the fortifications were destroyed, they would not resist at all and escape. They were even sure that Moxion's army did not have the time to chase after them, and swaggered around like a group of tourists. Every opening of a waterway was exchanged with the blood of countless of their ancestors. There were very few new waterways now because the price of opening them was too high. The various continents of the southern region all praised and respected this practical and simple famous general. The willpower of the local armies to resist became even more tenacious. Even if the fortifications were destroyed, the local armies that had previously scattered actually ran far away to guard, to see if they could take advantage of the situation. What Moxian did not know was that when he started to retreat and consecutively broke through a few fortifications, the entire southern region was in an uproar. Initially, everyone was skeptical of Xie Yuan's plan. Will Moxian retreat? I can't see any signs of it. But due to their trust and respect for Xie Yuan, they still completed the construction. Xie Yuan's mission also benefited a lot from it. Xie Yuan had practically maximized his advantage. If the quality of the army was not enough, he would use the quantity of the army. If the strength of the army was not enough, he would use the fortifications. If I cannot rely on the swift army, how can I complete the mission? How much is such a grade of fortifications worth? Chapter 868. Sacred Son Charles was in charge of the reconstruction of Blue Wind City. If anything happened, Sacred Son Charles would lose face, and the two of them would be in trouble. In many people's eyes, they were 100% loyal to Sacred Son Charles. Tang Tian had already received the latest report from Bing. Go Qing Wendao's fleet had suffered heavy losses. Moxn was forced into an unfamiliar sea. Qiu Suhua had cut off his arm, causing Temple's military strength to become tense. And Tang Tian's mission was to make Temple's tense military strength even more tense. That way, Temple would expose its soft underbelly and give Tang Tian the opportunity to kill them. All of the guards' eyes were bloodshot. They were stunned by the scene in front of them. After a short moment of silence, the soldiers had completely lost all reason and pounced forward. Lance was speechless. Compared to the Gold Continent bandits, the Sin domain was much more dangerous. Lance's mind was slightly roused. He sat up. I have some guesses. Magatama, who was like a ghost, was also extremely efficient. In the blink of an eye, corpses were strewn all over the place. What war? We don't need to fight and we have money. How many people are drooling over us? Norman disagreed. Tang Tian firmly locked onto Lance. At such a close distance, he would definitely not fail. The Sin domain's secret operation has already begun. The scalp-numbing sound came out. It was the sound of the bones in their bodies shattering. Do cannon fodder only have to risk their lives? The bitter smile on Norman's face became even denser. Kill them. Norman's pupils constricted. Sin domain. For example, Sin domain. Lance snapped his fingers. The Western traders colluded with the enemy. Our days are truly too good. In the past, who would have thought that there would be a day where we would be so rich? Norman sighed. After the battle ended, Tang Tian was still in disbelief. A powerful army was destroyed just like that. Bang. Not good. Do what we have to do. Lance said indifferently. If not, why would Sacred Son Charles treat us so well? I think he has already guessed it. Norman, there is no such thing as love without reason in this world. We need to help him solve this huge problem. If not, our good days will come to an end. Carl screamed from afar. Master, save us. Carl and the others landed in front of him. Carl's expression was a little stiff, as if he hadn't recovered from the attack. Norman replied with Lance's words. The battlefield is the home of a general. Of course he knew about Sin domain. If one were to speak of the Honorable Martial Continent's history of unifying the Western region, it would most probably be the Sin domain. In truth, the Honorable Martial Continent held different stances towards the Sin domain system. Many people thought that such losers should be killed to prevent future troubles, and that there was no need for the Sin domain to cover their ears and steal the bell. They first appeared in the White Fields continent. You know that it is very close to the entrance of the Sin domain. Lance's expression became serious. It has always been like this. Lance's expression was calm. Norman thought about Blue Wind City and his face became ugly. If something happens to Blue Wind City, we will also be in trouble. The entire process happened in an instant. Before Lance's guards could react, their two leaders were already dead. Lance had a satisfied look on his face. Now was the time when he was proud of his success. Sacred son Charles's favor had caused his market to soar. This could be seen from the amount of gifts that the Western traders had sent over. The battlefield is the home of a general, Norman. Lance reminded, you need to be more ambitious. Although it would never be as easy as the previous battle, but fighting to one's heart's content was still Tang Tian's favorite. Guess. Norman was startled. They are monsters. Chia reminded Tang Tian, the Xin domain had only disappeared for a few hundred years, and their influence in the land would not disappear so easily. They were once the owners of the land, and as long as they appeared, Temple's mental state would definitely be stretched taut. Tang Tian and the rest did not chase after them. Yes. His subordinate immediately replied and turned to leave. Carl, you dare betray Temple. But to be able to kill Lance and Norman, everyone was extremely satisfied. Suddenly a subordinate rushed in to report. Master. The Western traders have been ambushed. Blue Wind City is in flames. This is just the beginning. If both parties were to face off, it would be extremely difficult to defeat Lance's army. To any army, the commander was the soul, and losing the commander was a devastating blow to the army. The Sacred Saint Galaxy's army dominance emphasized on the military general's ability to command. Regardless of whether it was the military general or the soldiers, they did not emphasize on individual strength. In his eyes, although the Western traders were strong, but they could not be compared to a proper army. It was only because they did not meet any tough opponents that they could flaunt their strength. But upon meeting a truly powerful opponent, they would naturally reveal their true colors. On the contrary, the honorable martial banner of knights were the real deal, and every single one of them were experts. This is a trap. You seem to be confident? Norman glanced at Lance. Monster. Lance shrugged his shoulders. That's right. He was like an extremely heavy wild beast, fiercely crashing into Lance's embrace. Lance tried to react, but his movements were as slow as a tortoise in front of Tang Tian. Tang Tian did not give the soldiers the chance to organize themselves. As long as he noticed any soldiers or officers gathering, he would kill them without hesitation. At such a close distance, the might of the army could not be unleashed at all, and they were constantly being scattered by Tang Tian, causing chaos. Oliver was escorted to Temple, where Lance's army was the only intact army in the western region. With Lance's army disbanded, it meant that the honorable martial continent's western region was completely empty. Tang Tian did not have any fear with Lance's death. The soldiers were like lambs to him. He did not retreat but instead advanced like an arrow. He rushed into the crowd. He did not use any fancy techniques, but his terrifying strength made him the strongest killing machine. As long as he touched them, they would either die or be injured. Before he finished speaking, Lance's eyes blurred. A guard beside Carl suddenly pounced towards him. But, regardless of what stance they had towards the Xin domain, the higher-ups of the honorable martial continent knew that the Xin domain would forever be their enemy. Norman's face became ugly. Damn it. Where's the army stationed at the Xin door? What we have now is already very promising. Norman advised Lance. Don't think about fighting all day since you can't go to the Shang continent. We need to finish our own work first. Sacred Son Charles gave us the task of investigating. We cannot mess it up. Sima Xiao felt that Carl still had some value, and that it would be a pity for him to die. I hope so. Norman still had a bitter look on his face and did not relax because of Lance's words. He initially wanted to take advantage of the situation, but who knew that he would bump into a hard bone? Tang Tian looked at Sima Xiao. Magatama's bewitching ability was an unexpected surprise. Sima Xiao looked at Carl's corpse unwillingly. What a pity. Temple would definitely not sit by and watch the Xin domain rise again, and sending more troops became their only choice. We were ambushed. Seeing that their general was killed, the soldiers erupted with blood and madness, causing Tang Tian and Sima Xiao to feel an immense pressure, and it was at that time that Carl was torn to shreds by the berserk soldiers. Lance and Norman looked at each other. That is another terrible news. Lance revealed a bitter smile. Up till now we have not received any news from them. The Whitefields continent is in such a mess, but they seem to be asleep. Don't you think it is strange? Before flying far, the scouts discovered Carl in a terrible state. He only had a few bodyguards by his side, All of them were covered in blood. It was obvious that they had gone through a bitter battle. Norman immediately said, "Send people to investigate." That was why Norman was so anxious when Lance mentioned the Sin Domain. An enemy that will not rest until one side is dead. Lieutenant General Oliver was convicted, and Lance became the most authoritative person in the Western region. Thus the Western traders naturally had to curry favor with him. Not only did Lance not reject the Western traders, he even tried to rope them in. Lance's face changed. "There's an assassin." Tang Tian was filled with anticipation for the upcoming battle. "So tragic." Lance mumbled in a low voice, but he immediately put on a serious expression. "Carl, what's going on?" Lance clicked his tongue. "What grudge do the Gold Continent bandits have with the Western traders? They will not rest until one side is dead. Did Carl offend anyone?" No, I am just full of optimism." Lance laughed out loud. "Relax, Norman, this is the honorable Martial Continent. What can the Sin Domain, who are rotting in the trash heap of history, do?" This became the signal for the army to collapse, and more soldiers started to escape. He knew that he had made a fatal mistake. He actually allowed someone to charge in front of him. To a military general, to allow an assassin to reach him was a foolish and childish mistake. A military general without the protection of his soldiers was as weak as a straw. Western traders. Bang, a muffled sound that was several times louder than the previous one. Countless figures flew in all directions, and before they even landed on the ground they were all dead. That's more reasonable. Norman felt that it was natural. I wonder if the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights is dead or alive. Norman did not escape either. The moment Tang Tian made his move, Sima Xiao also made his move. Magatama appeared behind Norman like a ghost, and with a flash of light, Norman's head landed in Magatama's hands. Blue Wind City. It's just too boring. Lance said lazily, there's no war to fight. The soldiers' courage was slowly sapped, the blood in their eyes slowly faded, and what replaced it was fear. They had never seen such a powerful assassin before. Their speed was as fast as lightning, and no one could withstand a single move. They were like demons that walked out from hell, emotionless, coldly harvesting lives and never knowing fatigue. It looks rather miserable. Lance scratched his chin. The soldiers who had lost their general were like scattered sand. Fear took hold of their hearts and they started to turn and escape. Norman was startled. After a long while he laughed bitterly. Seems like we have met with a huge problem. What do we do now? Norman asked. Lance also felt that it was troublesome. Why is Carl so careless? Sai, this time we have to clean up his mess. Sai, I knew that the Western trader's money would not be easy to take. Let's go, we have taken his money, we cannot just watch him get killed. Who will we ask for money from in the future? Chapter 869. Sophie took it and took a look. She could not believe her own eyes. Impossible. Sophie shook her head. There are too many coincidences, there are too many accidental factors. I feel that it is more likely to be the Gold Continent. They want to disrupt our southern expedition. The Southern Alliance is from Heaven's Road. They do not have such a deep understanding of us. The possibility of it being the Gold Continent is higher. I am afraid that the Sin Domain is their target. Even if they were piloting small warships, they firmly believed that they could defeat any enemy. The silver light that had disappeared for 1,000 years blossomed once again in the distant foreign land. The horns were like frost, dazzling. Enemy attack. The Gold Continent and the Honorable Martial Continent, one in the east and one in the west, were the two strongest powerhouses. Both sides looked at each other from afar. They did not have any direct conflict of interest, but had restraining fear towards each other. Ling Su's eyes suddenly opened wide. He bellowed, "Attack." Seems like we need to clean ourselves up, to prevent some people from having unrealistic thoughts. Charles' tone did not have any warmth. Lance and Norman were killed by assassins. Carl had colluded with the enemy, causing the Lance army to suffer heavy losses. In times of need, the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights could interfere in any matter and take over any army. Then what about us? Oliver. The reply he got was a roar that sounded like a dam bursting. Kill. What kind of general was what kind of army they had? Sophie noticed that Charles had a bitter smile on his face. She rarely saw such an expression on his face. In her impression, Charles always had a smile on his face, and was so confident that it was irritating. Every Honorable Martial Banner of Knights gave their lives to Temple. Their holy flame of life burned in temple, and only when they died would the holy flame extinguish. It was obvious that the fleet was afraid of being ambushed and were extremely careful. Charles's handsome face was extremely calm. Roger is not weak, and under normal circumstances he will not be killed so easily. If the enemy is an army, or if Roger thinks that he has no chance of winning, Roger will definitely escape. He knows that it is more important to send the news back. Only if Roger misjudges the situation or falls into a trap and Roger does not sense the danger can he be killed. The enemy definitely does not have many people and they are extremely strong, that is why they can kill Roger. We need to send people over. Charles regained his composure. We need to use the fastest speed to understand what is going on and take care of them. The longer this drags on, the worse it will be for us. He risked his life in cultivation, risked his life in battle, and became the Ling Su of today. The angry roars of the officers echoed in every corner of the warship. Everyone involuntarily straightened their backs and gripped the silver spears in their hands tightly. Silver frost mounts. All of the generals replied and raised the silver spears in their hands. An almost undetectable warm smile flashed across Ling Su's stone-like face. His eyes fell on the enemy in front of him again, and a lofty feeling rose from his chest. Carl. Charles gritted his teeth. His handsome face was extremely sinister as he spoke. The Western traders have colluded with the enemy and are plotting a rebellion. Immediately investigate them. Find out for me. I want to see what benefits the other party gave them for them to actually dare to betray Temple. They're here. A scout said excitedly. As for himself, he had not done anything. The disappeared hero, the former legend, the supreme glory of Aries constellation. The sheep-horn wind bells fluttered without any wind, and amidst the melodious chimes, an ancient and desolate war song floated out from the sheep-horn seal. A shrill alarm sounded out in the fleet, and the three warships quickly reacted. The warships that were originally at the two sides of the replenishment ship quickly moved forward and positioned their bodies horizontally. The soldiers on the warships moved quickly and quickly entered their battle positions. The warship weapons on the warships lit up one after another. They had completed their preparations and were ready to attack. In such a sensitive and crucial period, the Honorable Martial Continent's internal stability surpassed everything else. Everyone's faces were extremely ugly. The Honorable Martial Banner of Knights were not only used to protect Temple's supreme authority. In the Honorable Martial Continent, the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights held an extremely high position, and were one of the symbols of Temple. Sophie knew of Colin. He was an outstanding person, and compared to the Lazy Lance he was much more stable. Sophie never thought that the situation would become so complicated. If this is a trap, then it's too scary. Charles muttered. There will be news soon. Charles's expression remained stern. I have a report here. I suspect that it has a personal relationship with Roger. I hope my intuition is wrong. When was the last time an Honorable Martial Banner of Knights was injured? Before the Honorable Martial Continent unified the Western region. And Ling Su's mission was to make the enemy's nervous manpower even more nervous. Sophie's body trembled. You're saying? The officer was about to give the order to attack, when his eyes suddenly constricted. What is that? The soldiers of the Honorable Martial Continent shared a common enemy, their eyes revealing rage. Now that Lance has been killed, it means that the Western region is completely empty. If teacher knew that I have tossed out the silver frost mounts, he will definitely be dumbstruck. A Honorable Martial Banner of Knights rushed in. He brought the latest news. The formation was majestic and did not move an inch. In the distance, a small fleet appeared in their field of vision. Their formation was extremely unique. The left and right wings were like sheep horns, extending forward in an arc, while Ling Su's center army was at the back. Above Ling Su's head, the silver frost sheep horn seal floated, releasing a faint silver light that enveloped the entire army. One after another, silver stripes appeared beneath the feet of the soldiers, like the whorls on the sheep horns. Before the battle, he could only watch as Crane killed in all four directions, and achieved many meritorious deeds, causing his name to spread to him. Even Jing Hao, who could only defend the Shang continent previously, controlled the energy vortex to work together with Crane, and almost buried the enemy's entire fleet. No. Charles shook his head. We have just convicted him. If we use him now, it will damage Temple's prestige. Let Colin go. Take charge of all matters in the Western region. Whoever or whatever army dares to disobey orders, kill them on the spot. Seeing the determination on Charles's face, Sophie nodded her head. She asked, "What news?" No one dared to become enemies with the honorable martial banner of knights. Ling Su's expression was equally solemn. For some reason he thought of his teacher. Silver frost mounts. Ling Su bellowed and raised the silver spear in his hand. With such a small number of people they dare to directly charge at us. That is a naked disdain towards us. The warships that were on high alert immediately discovered the enemy. Sophie did not say anything. She was still immersed in shock. Out of all the lieutenant generals, Lance had the highest possibility of becoming a great general. His strength and talent were extremely outstanding. The reason why Charles dared to so decisively send Oliver to Temple was because he firmly believed that Lance could stabilize the situation. "Yes. Prepare to go to the Shang continent," Charles said resolutely. "Regardless of what tricks they have up their sleeves, as long as we find the passage, victory will be ours." The silver spear is like snow, untainted by the clouds. The sound of the sheep horn bells, the cool breeze does not carry it. The sun shines but no shadows, the spear is straight. The vast heart protect my stars. Thinking about the Sin domain that had revived and the Gold Continent bandits that appeared and disappeared unpredictably, the situation in the western region was extremely dangerous. Ling Su took a deep breath. He had prepared for a long time for this ambush. Sophie's face was as cold as ice, her entire body releasing a terrifying killing intent. Even the honorable martial banner of knights nearby could not take it, and could not help but take 2 steps back. Just a moment ago, the clan elder in charge of Holy Flames came to report with a flustered expression, saying that Roger's life holy flames had been extinguished. A haze flashed past Charles's eyes and he said, "I have an extremely dangerous premonition. The front lines have suffered continuous losses, the Sin domain has revived and the Gold Continent bandits have yet to be found. The timing is so coincidental, don't you think it is too coincidental?" When Charles finished reading, his face turned green. Ling Su's face was filled with killing intent. Without saying a word, he spoke with an ice-cold tone, "Get ready. Whoever drops the chain today will be stabbed to death by my spear. We are the elites of the honorable martial continent. We are invincible. All of these dirty fellows only dare to use sneak attacks against us. They are afraid of us and do not dare to fight us head-on. The supply ships that lacked the protection of the fleet were their best targets." "That's right." Sophie calmed down. She was extremely clear of Roger's strength and standard. The revival of the Sin domain had already made Charles cautious. The Western traders colluding with the enemy had completely solidified his determination to cleanse them. Everyone's killing intent was released and they were also stifled. Who doesn't have some pride? Seeing my own comrades stirring up trouble in the battlefield, while I can only crawl in the mud, how can I not be angry? 3 supply ships with 3 small-scale warships protecting them. Thinking about Go Ching Wendao's vast and mighty fleet that covered the sky, Ling Su could not help but sigh. Crane and Jing Hao are truly too ferocious. All the voices disappeared and all of them had solemn expressions. Charles took a deep breath. Regarding the Sin domain, they have revived. It seems that our Sin domain army did not guard the door well. The Gold Continent bandits and the Sin domain, our western region is currently bustling with activity. And I suspect that the 2 of them have already colluded together, and the Sin domain is starting to jump up and down. Although I believe that the majority of them are still loyal to Temple, but at this crucial moment we have to be on guard. The enemy's speed became faster and faster, like a silver lightning. The silver spears were like a forest, whimpering as they reverberated. Ling Su's killing intent soared, his gaze unkind. Although he did not think that he was wasting time, but Ling Su would never find excuses. If they were late, then they were late. If they did not obtain any merits, then they did not have any excuses. Luo Jie is dead. Charles nodded his head. That makes sense. The Gold Continent also understands that once we complete the southern expedition, unifying the Sacred Saint Galaxy is just around the corner. But their timing is truly good. Yes. One of the honorable martial banner of knights immediately turned and left. In this period of time he had been training his silver frost mounts. Compared to the invincible iron cavalry in history, this group of fake goods under his command was far too inferior. Luckily for him, he had the silver frost sheep horn seal, which contained the method to train the silver frost mounts. Ling Su knew that he was not a genius and was not as smart as Crane, but he had absolute confidence in himself, and that was to fight. Damn it. Come, let us tell these dirty ants that they are not worthy to be our opponents. Their target was the Honorable Martial Continent's supply ships, and the Shang Continent's Goqing Wendao. Their fleet had been destroyed and they were waiting for reinforcements. The closest to Goqing Wendao was the army that he had arranged at the supply line. On one hand they had to support Goqing Wendao, on the other hand, they had to ensure the safety of the supply line, thus they were lacking in manpower. Chapter 870. The thick pillar of light and the sword ray collided with the thin membrane of light without any fancy moves. The dense and chaotic energy produced intense explosions. The orange flames were like a monster that broke out of its cocoon, devouring everything around it. The unstable energy in the battlefield was too much and became the best fuel. A chain of explosions occurred in a short period of time, frantically spreading out. The burning silver light was rapidly compressed, forming a layer of condensed light film that seemed to be real. One after another, sword auras and spear auras struck the enemies, exploding into shattered auras. Most importantly, although they were piloting small-scale warships, but they were the best of the best, their fighting capabilities were strong, far surpassing the ordinary warships on the market. His understanding of battles had never changed. Attack with all your might. The officers were hysterical. In a battle in the Sea of Energy, having a warship or not had a huge difference. Without a warship they had to face the corrosion of the Sea of Energy, and the synchronization of energy had become extremely difficult. The warship's weapons only needed to be controlled. The energy was provided by the warship, and the hull could even provide protection for the soldiers. Looking at the members in front of him who had regained their fighting spirit, he was furious. His own silver frost mounts were actually not confident enough. Ling Su announced expressionlessly, "Tomorrow's training will be doubled." The soldiers were also in a frenzy. The threat of death had completely ignited their potential. They disregarded everything else and attacked even if they were injured. Many of the soldiers had blood flowing out of their mouths, causing their sinister faces to look even more terrifying. The originally goat horn-like formation began to approach each other. They were like two silver lightning bolts intertwining in the air. The entire formation was like a spinning lightning bolt, dragging a long silver light tail. Behind the tail were extremely concentrated radiating ripples. On the battlefield, imposing manner was an extremely subtle thing. It deeply affected every aspect of the battle: determination, focus, confidence, etc., and the soldier's performance was directly related to it. Ling Su and the rest had already completed their turn, and once again began their assault. Without any suspense, like a red-hot knife cutting through butter, the second warship was also sliced in half, transforming into two balls of flames. But he did not explain to his members in case they became arrogant after a small victory. Such a high-pressure policy might be effective, but it did not originate from faith, and once it reached a critical point it would quickly crumble. The soldiers quivered and all opened fire. As if awakened from a dream, the officers roared, "Fire!" The power of the explosion was so great that even the fleet was affected, and it was forcibly pushed back over 200 feet. Ling Su was in a good mood. In any case, he had achieved a breakthrough from zero. This was something to be happy about. A sharp aura surged. The attack was too fierce. Before the light fragments could dissipate, new light fragments exploded. In the blink of the eye, the silver frost mount's figure was engulfed by the continuously expanding shattered auras, and could not be seen clearly. However, the three battleships had no intention of stopping. They didn't dare to stop and could only continue to attack. Even though he was now leading a team, this did not change. He was straightforward and efficient. Regardless of whether his opponent was insignificant or as deep as the ocean, he would always go all out and never leave a way out. This was his spear technique, this was his fighting style. The Honorable Martial Continent's strict discipline was displayed. Even though they knew that they had no chance of winning, the remaining two transport ships did not surrender. Ling Su did not waver in the slightest. His orange eyes were like raging flames, burning fiercely. "As long as you are more tenacious than them," Ling Su said coldly. A terrifying explosion. One spear to death. The soldiers watched on blankly as the silver light enlarged in their vision. All-out attack. Inside the bright red flames, a group of silver figures rushed out. They were the silver frost mounts. On their light membrane, There were many remnants of flames, and compared to before, the light membrane was much dimmer, almost to the point of being transparent, like a bubble that could burst at any moment. The clothes on their bodies were also damaged to varying degrees, and the weaker silver frost mounts were even more heavily injured. But he quickly reacted, his face turning pale white. He used all his strength to shout, "They are still alive." The indestructible protective barrier was like a piece of paper, instantly shattering into pieces. But the enemy is so tenacious. The member muttered, even the transport ships were so tenacious, it was a huge blow to them. The silver frost mounts were immediately filled with wails. The joy of victory seemed to have been diluted by a lot. Even the disciples of the 5 southern island families had ugly expressions on their faces. It was obvious that the honorable Martial Continent was not an easy opponent to defeat. The 5 southern island families and the honorable Martial Continent had a blood feud, and the enemy was much stronger than they had imagined. Damn it! The warship's attacks were actually unable to do anything to the enemy's thin light membrane. Following their increase in speed, Ling Su's position continued to move forward. The sword auras and spear auras suddenly became denser, and the sudden light auras even affected the vision of the soldiers on the warship. But no one cared about it, they only had one thought in their minds. The members of the silver frost mounts looked at their results, and gradually regained their senses from their excitement. If it was said that they only had an intuition of danger previously, then even the stupidest person would know that the situation was not good. Crack, it was as though the warship was sliced into two by a gigantic blade. The soldiers on the warship were completely panicking. They tried their best to rush out, with only one thought in their minds: escape. Everything in their vision had disappeared, and only the terrifying red light remained. The warship's protective barrier had been activated to its limit, but everyone could still feel the scorching heat. Ling Su suddenly stopped, his gaze was like a blade that swept across everyone. Many of them lowered their heads, but even more of them looked at him with anticipation. The soldiers and officers on the warship were shocked by the silver frost mount's imposing aura, and were momentarily dazed. But in that short moment of daze, the silver frost mounts had barged into their attack range. Ling Su's style had directly influenced the silver frost mounts. Their fearlessness towards death was already the most prominent characteristic of the group. Previously, the sharp aura that the 3 warships felt was only from the silver frost mounts enveloping the entire battlefield. But now the extremely dense sharp aura had been compressed from the entire battlefield and converged onto their bodies, causing the feeling to be completely different. The warship's protective barrier was unable to give them any sense of security. It was as though they were being stabbed by blades. All of the blood in their bodies were frozen, and their skin felt as though it was being sliced by blades. Before they could escape, a loud bang sounded out. A dazzling light aura suddenly lit up, and mercilessly devoured the soldiers that were unable to escape in time. The explosion of the warship had completely destroyed the enemy's fighting spirit, and the remaining warship and 2 transport ships escaped in different directions. But for the sake of pursuing an even more concentrated attack, the 3 warships were extremely close to each other, and before the 3rd warship could even escape 300 m away, Ling Su and the silver frost mounts caught up to it, and was completely destroyed. And when Ling Su rushed to the front of the group, the momentum of his assault reached its peak. An intense fear spread out from the soldiers' hearts. They were all experienced veterans and had a special intuition towards danger. Without needing the officers to urge them, they attacked frantically. The dazzling light auras shot towards the incoming enemies like raindrops. All of the soldiers on the warships were veterans, and knew that the best way to face fear and danger was to use all of their strength. The silver frost mounts were like extremely sharp silver spears, effortlessly piercing into the hull of the warship. The sturdy hull was unable to stop the silver frost mounts at all. Wherever the silver frost mounts passed, wood shavings and broken limbs would fly. Many people did not even have the time to scream out, before Ling Su and the silver frost mounts had already passed through the ship. Bang bang bang. The nearby sea of energy was completely stirred. Suddenly, their gazes coincidentally swept across the soldiers outside the window, and as though they were struck by lightning, they were dumbstruck. Someone could not help but sigh, "These fellows are truly tenacious." The silver frost mounts did not make any movements to dodge, giving the 3 warships a huge advantage in their attacks, as they were able to lock onto their targets effortlessly. The pitiful speed of the transport ships made it impossible for them to escape. Bang! The entire sea of energy seemed to tremble, and even inside the warships, the soldiers could clearly feel the terrifying tremors. The light pillars and sword auras were like fragile biscuits, shattering into pieces, transforming into a rain of light. The Silver Frost Mount's forward momentum was completely unaffected. The 3 small-scale warships, each warship had 6 warship weapons, and the 18 warship weapons were the Honorable Martial Continent's officers' greatest confidence. To them, controlling the warship weapons was much more advantageous than using an army to attack. But no one retreated. All of them held onto the silver spears in their hands tightly, surging energy surging out from their bodies and into the sheep horn seal above their heads. The sheep horn seal's light aura suddenly expanded, releasing an even denser silver light. The initially unstable light barrier quickly congealed, and became even more congealed than before. The silver light released by the sheep horn seal suddenly combusted. The light aura around Ling Su's body suddenly became extremely dazzling. The extremely sharp aura instantly enveloped the entire sea of energy. The 2 silver lights that were originally entangled suddenly merged into one, becoming as straight as a spear, and the dazzling Ling Su was the sharpest spearhead. Master, can we truly defeat the Honorable Martial Continent? On the waterway, only the raging flames remained. There were no survivors. Everyone was shocked, but they were even more relieved. Such a terrifying explosion without the protection of the warships, no one could survive. The taut strings loosened, and the exhausted soldiers sat on the ground one after another. Although the battle was short, but to everyone, it was as though they had strolled through the gates of hell. It was extremely bitter. Ling Su did not find it strange at all. In Heaven's Road, he had long seen how Temple treated their own military generals. He knew that it was not that the soldiers did not want to surrender, but that they did not dare to because it would implicate their families. That's right, no one surrendered. No wonder the Honorable Martial Continent is so strong. Ling Su frowned. Bullshit. Suddenly, a member asked, causing everyone to stop what they were doing and look at Ling Su. But all of their confidence had crumbled in the face of the assault. Chapter 871. Blue Dwarf Army. Go Ching Wendao squinted his eyes. He was surprised. Under such circumstances, Colin was entrusted with a heavy responsibility. An army barracks in the central Yongming continent was attacked, causing the panic in the Honorable Martial Continent to reach its peak. Ken walked in, and when Go Ching Wendao saw Ken's battered and exhausted appearance, his heart sank. The supply lines were continuously attacked, and from the current reports, it should be 2 small armies. One of them was the Underworld Continent's demonic mounts. The Southern Alliance had a group of Underworld Continent's demonic mounts. They were extremely powerful, and many people knew of them. The Underworld Continent's demonic mounts, a declining army, had regained its glory in the hands of the Southern Alliance, and attracted everyone's attention. The awakening of the Blue Dwarves was extremely rare, and the Blue Dwarf Army was even rarer. The Blue Dwarf armies were basically all active in the core region of the Blue World, and in the past Blue Tide, there had never been a Blue Dwarf army. But it was this bad hand of cards, but the Southern Alliance turned it into something miraculous and forcefully turned it into a good hand. The fear continued to grow, until the Gold Continent bandits killed their way out of the western region and into the central region. Zhong Libai turned to look at the continuous mountain valleys. He was extremely moved. I finally ran out of that damned place. There were no traces of enemies around. It was a desolate place. The current Silver Frost Mounts and Underworld Continent's demonic mounts once again made Go Ching Wendao feel uneasy. But the Blue Dwarf Army made Go Ching Wendao cautious. Countless eyes in the Honorable Martial Continent were staring at Colin. Colin's steady and experienced actions made many people secretly nod their heads. It was good that the Sin domain was revived. Regardless of how the enemies tossed and turned, Temple's absolute strength far surpassed the Sin domain. In such a situation, the so-called stratagems were not as effective as suppressing them with strength. Temple's nervousness could be imagined. Yes. Ken's voice was hoarse. There are many blue dwarves. It should be the Blue Dwarf Army. Their attacks are extremely methodical, and we have suffered huge losses. Everyone in the Holy Cathedral firmly believed that Sir Colin would return triumphantly this time. Zhong Libai did not waste any time. He quickly led the monster army and launched a surprise attack on one of Temple's barracks. This army that was formed to maintain order never thought that they would meet such a strong enemy. And for the sake of not alerting the enemy, Zhong Libai specially ordered for the monsters to use their pitiful flying abilities to quietly fly out of the barracks. Xie Yuan was just an ordinary military general in the past. His most dazzling achievement was to be in charge of the security of a local army. What was worse was that he and his swift army were bought by Tang Tian. He bought it at an extremely low price, so low that it made one's hair stand on end. Zhong Libai was like a crafty wolf. His movements were unpredictable and hard to predict. What was even more cunning was that he only looked for the weak local armies to take action. More and more of the local armies were being killed, and one after another, the massacre caused the atmosphere in the honorable martial continent to become even tenser. The local armies were all in danger, as though they were facing a great enemy, afraid that the Gold Continent bandits would kill their way in. After the Blue Tide had happened for so many years, the sacred saint's understanding of the blue dwarves had also gradually increased. The number of blue dwarves in the blue world was almost endless. They often appeared like a tide. Most of the blue dwarves did not have intelligence. They did not have independent consciousness. They relied on their numbers and instincts to fight. When they encountered an enemy, they would swarm forward. The honorable martial continent had not had a war for a long time, and such cruel actions were unheard of. In the history of the honorable martial continent, they had always been the ones who brought pain to others. Compared to the underworld continent's demonic mounts, the other silver frost mounts were unknown. It was said that it was an army that had just been formed, and even their commander was a rookie. But it was this rookie army and their rookie commander that caused his supply line to be in chaos. To Zhong Libai, who was a maniac in destruction, such an opportunity was extremely rare, and it was like a piece of fatty meat was placed in front of him. He could attack from any direction he wanted. Go Qing Wendao looked at the report expressionlessly. Go Qing Wendao knew why there was such a huge deviation. It was this group of people that made it difficult for him to move forward, and caused him to fall into such a passive state. Seeing their growth, Go Qing Wendao felt a bone-chilling cold. He did not know how Tang Tian had gathered this group of people, but behind this group of people, there was a mysterious figure. They knew that the situation was dangerous. They did not have a path of retreat, and it was definitely not the time to care about casualties. Other than advancing forward, they had no other choice. We were ambushed by the blue dwarves. Zhong Libai's face was covered with stubble, making him look like a savage. He did not care. His eyes that resembled a hungry wolf flashed with a dangerous light aura. He had used the big canyon to shake off the enemies, which meant that he had regained the initiative. He heard footsteps outside. It's Ken. Go Qing Wendao's mind was roused. A trace of anticipation grew in his heart. Could it be that we have found the entrance to Heaven's Road? Ken knew what the master meant. He took a deep breath and said with determination, "Yes." Blue dwarves? Go Qing Wendao was startled. For some reason he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He quickly sensed that he was acting strangely, and could not help but laugh bitterly. It seemed like his fear towards the Southern Alliance had far exceeded his imagination. He did not leave a single captive. What made Go Qing Wendao even more worried was not just the situation. He suddenly realized that their estimation of the Southern Alliance's strength had deviated greatly. Even Go Qing Wendao, who had his eyes on the top of his head, had to admit that Bing was an outstanding commander. It could be said that Bing had used his own strength to bring about the Southern Alliance's current situation. The 5 Southern Island families that had escaped, the never-before-heard Crane, the newly formed Silver Frost Mounts, and Jing Hao, who was hidden in the energy vortex. Upon their appearance, they had released dazzling light auras that caused the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy to turn their heads. Looking at the cards in the Southern Alliance's hands, compared to the honorable Martial Continent, they were all trash. In the entire Southern Alliance's camp, the only one that could be considered famous was actually Bai Yu. There was no need to talk about the underworld continent's demonic mounts. They had long been forgotten by the people, and in the eyes of the people they were just swindlers. But under Tang Tian's command, they had transformed into a terrifying iron cavalry that caused people to tremble in fear. In the current underworld continent, the once forgotten demonic mounts test had once again become popular. With the continuous addition of new blood, the iron cavalry became even stronger. Bing, the Southern Alliance's commander-in-chief, was the first spirit general commander in history. It was Bing who was in charge of the central command deploying the troops, that gave Go Qing Wendao a huge problem. He was like a sharp and dangerous blade that had pierced into the enemy's soft abdomen. At the same time he bought the Skull Unit, a mercenary army that was not even considered as a standard in the eyes of the honorable Martial Continent. But it was precisely this mercenary army that had displayed an extremely cruel and intense battle in the Stone Forest Sand Continent. Their tenacious fighting spirit had shocked the Sacred Saint Galaxy. Although he could roughly guess the Southern Alliance's next attack, but when it truly happened, Go Qing Wendao was still depressed. The Sin Domain's revival made them feel as though they were facing a great enemy, and their mental state was extremely tense. If we were to say that swallowing Heaven's Road was the dream of the Honorable Martial Continent for generations, then the Sin Domain's return to the Honorable Martial Continent had the possibility of destroying their foundation. The fleet was heavily damaged and he only had a few pitiful small-scale warships, which were more like a feast for the enemy. The Southern Alliance was extremely proficient in fighting in the Sea of Energy on foot, and they had obviously gone through specialized training. Before this, Go Qing Wendao would never have thought that there would actually be people who would persevere through such training. The Sea of Energy was still the world of warships, that was the most basic knowledge. Go Qing Wendao did not have many ideas. The Southern Alliance had completely toppled that common sense. Ever since the ambush at the wreckage region, it was as though the Southern Alliance was continuously demonstrating to them how armies could contend against warships in the Sea of Energy. Tactics that completely went against common sense were displayed in the Southern Alliance. Go Qing Wendao had personally experienced it, and it was an extremely profound experience. Controlling the energy vortices and lying in ambush in the energy turbulence region for 5 days, those tactics were even more unfathomable and unheard of. Go Qing Wendao looked deeply at his left and right arms and nodded his head. Do not care about the casualties. All of the soldiers that can be moved will be under your command, including my direct subordinate army. The request for reinforcements from Temple has already been sent out, and very quickly Temple's reinforcements will arrive. It was not strange to meet the Blue Dwarves in the Blue World, as the Blue World was the Blue Dwarves' world, and it would be strange if they did not meet the Blue Dwarves. It was not strange for them to suffer huge losses from encountering the Blue Dwarves, as the Blue World's environment was not suitable for the Honorable Martial Continent's armies to fight, while the Blue Dwarves were able to unleash their greatest strength, and Go Qing Wendao had long expected such losses. Go Qing Wendao raised his head, his face expressionless. Can we still continue? Go Qing Wendao was an arrogant and confident man, but he was definitely not a fool. Yes, it is definitely an army and they are well trained. If we were on the ground or in the Sea of Energy we would definitely win, but we are not used to the Blue World. Ken said solemnly. He did not exaggerate, nor did he hide anything. When the bronze monsters broke through the barracks like a tide, all of the soldiers who were still asleep were unable to resist at all, and were all captured by Zhong Li Bai. Colin knew why he was Temple's first choice, and knew the situation that Temple was in. After receiving the order, he did not advance rashly. After sending out a large number of scouts to the White Fields continent, his large army fought steadily, and along the way they continued to gather the local armies. Go Qing Wendao was right. Temple had already received his request for reinforcements, but he definitely did not expect that Temple was also in trouble. Ken's voice was filled with fatigue. They actually met with the Blue Dwarves' army, and the situation was slightly abnormal. Out of the many lieutenant generals, Colin's talent could not be compared to Lance and could only be considered average, but his way of doing things was extremely stable. He was diligent and had never made any mistakes. Zhong Li Bai did not have any intention to restrain himself. In a short period of time he had fought in multiple continents and consecutively took down a few barracks. And in every battle he did not leave anyone alive. The entire Honorable Martial Continent was shocked by Zhong Li Bai's ruthless actions. Chapter 872. The Light Palace simultaneously let out a sigh of relief. The order was passed down, and the army quickly advanced towards Whitefields continent. Colin decided to set up camp in the Whitefields continent, and see what the desolate continent had become. If the energy was really thin it would be a big problem, especially during such a crucial period. Right above the Sindor army's encampment, there was an additional stronghold that was heavily guarded. What was even more unexpected was that the desolate continent was actually transformed into a place similar to the Sin domain. The energy in the entire desolate continent was extremely sparse, and the scouts that entered were completely unable to adapt. There's not even a shadow. What's there to scout? Another scout mumbled, his face a little pale. After flying for 3 days without seeing a single person, it was definitely not a pleasant experience. This time no one had any objections. Everyone was frightened. Everyone suppressed the shock in their hearts and answered in unison, "Yes. I handed the matter over to you and you're just going to give me this kind of answer?" The golden holy flame silently swallowed. Charles was also secretly surprised. He never thought that temple would actually be lacking in manpower, but he maintained a calm expression. Immediately set off the fleet to reinforce the Shang continent. Do not delay. Master Jia could not be touched. He urged Colin to be faster, and told him that he had to get rid of the Whitefields continent before the second wave of reinforcements. This was a must. We have no time to waste. The fire whip struck Charles's back, causing his body to tremble. His handsome face contorted and his whole body to tremble. This whip seemed to have struck his soul. The immense pain caused his mind to go blank and his body to spasm. Everyone was stunned. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Which one of them wasn't a person of high status and prestige? But just now they couldn't even muster the slightest bit of resistance. The first elder was too terrifying. Each word exploded in the air, ringing in everyone's ears. The Gold Province bandits are very good at hide and seek. We can't be anxious. Charles was as calm as usual. The first thing we have to do is limit the Gold Province bandits' activity space. Bandits were like fish on a chopping board once there was no more space. The 4 lieutenant generals in charge of the second wave of reinforcements moved out from 4 directions and squeezed the Gold Province bandits' space. I need you to put a cage around the Golden Province bandits. As long as we put a cage on them, a few local armies will be enough to exhaust them. The great clan elder did not care about worldly affairs for many years, and wholeheartedly researched on Heaven's Road martial techniques. The matters of temple were usually handed over to Charles and the other clan elders. The great clan elder did not have any presence, and the new clan elders had never even seen the great clan elder before. "Yeah. I've been here before and there are mining ships everywhere. We've been flying for so long but we haven't seen a single person. It's like the uninhabited continent. It's a little scary." Charles said, "Once the second wave of support leaves, we will only have Sir Jia and Colin left." Master Jia was definitely untouchable, and if Colin had not taken care of the Whitefields continent, that meant that the Honorable Martial continent was completely empty. If something happens we won't even have people to put out the fire. But at that moment, the entire temple was bowing down to the great clan elder. Even the air and energy were trembling. Everyone in the hall kept quiet out of fear, their faces pale. Above them, a burly figure was shrouded in golden flames, and his face could not be seen. The roar came from within the flames. Everyone below looked at the golden flames with reverence. "All of you shut up." The great clan elder's roar resonated through the entire temple, and even the light in the pillar of light trembled. He had thought of the situation that he might face, but he never expected that the remnants of the Sin domain would actually have the ability to change the environment. A group of scouts all had ugly expressions on their faces. They looked at each other. Charles, who was bending down, trembled. The great clan elder's gaze on his back seemed to have solidified, causing him to feel as if his back was burning, and actually produced a burning pain. That handsome face was as calm as still water. He said respectfully, "Great elder. 7 barracks were continuously massacred. It is truly shocking. I have never seen such a scene before." The scouts at the front kept on sending back news. Everyone looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. When Colin's army arrived at the Whitefields continent, he was stunned by the desolate scene in front of him. Charles had the pearl of wisdom in his hands. He said calmly, "We don't have much time. More importantly, we are lacking in manpower, especially our elites. On the contrary, we have many local armies, extremely many, and their fighting strength is unable to support the front lines. Since that's the case, why do we need to waste our precious elites?" The scouts felt even more intense. "Why don't we let them settle it directly?" An elder could not help but ask. The elders were enlightened and all nodded their heads. Hearing that, the captain no longer objected. "All right, then let us return. We will inspect the cities along the way. That is the best place to set up an ambush." "What do we do now?" an elder asked. "Our target, Whitefields continent, advance at full speed." "Is this still the flourishing and stable Honorable Martial continent?" Bang. Although Temple's order would increase the trouble for him, but the situation forced him to do so. Without hesitation, he immediately gave the order to advance. This battle will not be easy. Everyone bowed even lower. The honorable martial palace was dead silent. Only Charles's beast-like gasps of pain could be heard clearly. Everyone knew that the great clan elder was truly enraged. The whip of Saint Punishment was a punishment to the soul, and originated from the deepest pain in a person's heart. We are not done scouting. The captain hesitated. A thick pillar of light shot down from an unfathomable depth in the sky. The dense radiant energy enveloped the white palace. The snow-white palace looked as though it was carved out of the purest white marble, and the white light from the pillar of light continued to enter the palace. Only those who had been here before knew that the entire palace was completely condensed out of radiant energy. Jia is holding the fort. Colin is going to the Whitefields continent. Lance is dead and Oliver is still locked up. An army formed by 5 lieutenant generals is preparing to move out. They are going to support the Shang continent. This is the first wave. They are going to bring a large number of warships to Goqing Wendao. Other than that, we need to increase the manpower for the supply line. Our supply line is too long. So we need to prepare for the second wave. The Honorable Martial Banner of Knights also need to go. We need to quickly find the entrance to Heaven's Road. Ordinary soldiers are weak in the blue world. The problem now is who will handle the Gold Continent bandits. No one had ever seen the great clan elder lose his composure and roar. In their hearts, it was as though even if Temple disappeared, the great clan elder would remain indifferent. Colin's face was gloomy. He had never seen such a desolate scene in the Honorable Martial Continent. What about the Gold Continent bandits? An elder asked worriedly. Many people nodded their heads. Punish? Of course we will punish them. The great clan elder's face was completely enveloped by the holy flame, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. He suddenly raised his right arm, and the golden holy flame extended along his arm, transforming into a golden fiery whip. The clothes on his back were as smooth as before, without any traces of fire and not even a single wrinkle. Every city that they passed by was empty, and the morale of the army was affected, causing them to be slightly low. There were no bandits in the Honorable Martial Continent. Colin received the order from Temple but did not say anything. He was extremely clear of the current situation in the Honorable Martial Continent. To him, it was the most difficult period for the Honorable Martial Continent, and also the most important period for them. The Honorable Martial Continent would actually face a day where they did not have enough military strength. The powerful Honorable Martial Continent, the Honorable Martial Continent that was famed for its military strength, the Honorable Martial Continent that was filled with famous generals, actually did not have enough military strength. That was the Holy Flame, the highest grade Holy Flame. The great clan elder's voice was not fast, but it was filled with authority and power. Every word was like a golden hammer smashing into the air. There was practically no one in the entire Whitefields continent. Every city was empty. After the calamity of the Gold Continent bandits, the number of people in the Whitefields continent had declined greatly. And because the Whitefields continent and the Desolate continent were too close, in this period of time, Sin domain martial artists would continuously appear, causing even more panic. The citizens who were initially prepared to watch all chose to leave, as there were too many places like the Whitefields continent in the western region. After a full 5 minutes, Sacred Son Charles's eyes that looked as though they were on the verge of death regained some spirit, but deep in his eyes, there was still a trace of fear. It was too terrifying. No matter how strong his willpower was, he definitely did not want to encounter it a second time. Another elder was calculating one by one, his face filled with distress. There is no reason, no excuse, only the result. The great clan elder's gaze swept across the entire place. Colin's expression became serious. Then why is Colin so anxious? Someone asked. Trash. All of you are trash. I think it's about time. Let's go back. One of the more timid scouts could not help but say. Charles knew that begging and evading would only make the great clan elder even angrier, so he took a deep breath. Great clan elder, please punish me. The great clan elder had always favored Charles, and there were even rumors saying that Sacred Son Charles was the great clan elder's illegitimate son. It was the first time the great clan elder had punished Sacred Son Charles, and it was such a severe whip of saint punishment. Charles. Everyone was silent. Many of them had yet to recover from the shock they had just experienced. The great clan elder's anger was still fresh in their minds, and no one dared to go against him. A golden flame soared into the sky, transforming into a shooting star and disappearing. The terrifying pressure suddenly disappeared, and the suffocating atmosphere became lively. Hearing you say that, your father, feel a chill down my spine. Quiet. It was extremely quiet. After thinking about it, the results caused all the clan elders to reveal looks of disbelief. In front of us is the worship cemetery. The scout who had been to the Whitefields continent before agreed. There's no one in the city, there definitely won't be anyone in the worship cemetery. We should focus on the desolate continent, this battle will not be easy to fight. As expected of the Sin domain. But it is not the Whitefields continent but the desolate continent. The Honorable Martial Palace, the entire Honorable Martial continent, the entire temple, the most sacred place, the source of light. Chapter 873. Although she knew that the scouts would not be of much use, but Zhou Xian still sent out a large number of scouts. In the Sin domain there were pitifully few armies, but the number of martial artists that had the strength to act as scouts were countless. She did not hope for the scouts to be able to deal much damage to the enemy, but to be able to divert the enemy's attention. Colin's army had lost 15 scouts, while the Sin domain only had 2 casualties. It was a huge disparity. But the shrewd and ruthless Colin was completely unaffected. Zhou Xian did not care about her brother, who was always a bit bookish. Her gaze never left the enemy's formation and muttered to herself, "The quality of the soldiers is very high and not inferior to us. The formation is extremely skilled, the synchronization rate that Tang Tian spoke of is definitely very high, they are a powerful army. The problem now, how will he solve it?" Colin did not have enough manpower, but regardless of anything, the army was much stronger than the cannon fodder armies. This made Colin heaved a sigh of relief. The first thing Colin did when he entered the western region was to incorporate the elites. With Oliver in prison, his army was like a group of dragons without a leader. Their morale was extremely low, but their overall strength was not greatly affected, and they were still an elite force that could be used. Colin did not care about the scouts, although there were many of them, but it was a mess and they were just a motley crew. In a large-scale war, individual strength did not have much use. No matter how strong the scouts were, no matter how many of them there were, it could not change the fact that they were just a motley crew. Zhou Xian turned and looked at her brother, who had a determined look on his face. His last sentence was resolute and decisive. His gaze landed on the Sindor stronghold. Du Ku and his sister were carefully observing the enemy's barracks. They did not have any guards by their side, making them look no different from the other scouts. The two of them received many objections from their subordinates, but Du Ku had the confidence and strength to do so. Colin was experienced, and after personally inspecting the desolate continent's environment, he quickly formulated a battle plan. His gaze landed on the Sin domain scouts that were roaming far away. Their every move was under the surveillance of the Sin domain scouts. It was Colin's first time seeing a Sin domain martial artist, as Temple had always kept the matters of the Sin domain a secret, and the citizens were unable to find any information about the Sin domain. The barracks were unmoving, but the area dozens of miles away from the barracks was the area where the battle was the most intense. Colin could see the bone-deep hatred in the eyes of the Sin domain martial artists. They were extremely daring and brimming with aggression, and had already killed over 10 of Colin's scouts. Zhou Xian was not affected by the numbers. She spoke coldly. "The honorable martial continent is truly a colossus. If not for Tang Tian, we would not have any chance of winning." The honorable martial continent had 12 of such armies. The 5 great generals were even more astonishing. Every great general had at least 3 such great armies, and their direct subordinated armies were even stronger. I really don't know how Tang Tian's Southern Alliance can stop the 5 great generals' army. Everyone in the fortress wore a solemn expression. The energy in the air was extremely thin, and he felt uncomfortable staying there any longer. Colin felt like a fish out of water. The strong feeling of suffocation made it difficult for him to move. He could even sense that the energy in his body was slowly disappearing, which meant that they definitely could not drag the battle into a stalemate, as it would be disadvantageous to them. Even though he had made all of his preparations to quickly end the battle, but when the battle truly started, he completely forgot about it. Orders after orders were passed down. He patrolled back and forth meticulously. The Sin domain scouts were extremely agile. The thin energy did not affect them at all, and they were like fish in water in such an environment. Even Dooku, who was an outsider, could see that Colin's standard was extremely high. From advancing to setting up camp to the construction of the camp, the entire process was done in an orderly manner. Every soldier knew what they were supposed to do. The Sin Domain scouts who were eyeing them like tigers could not find any opportunity, and could only watch from afar. In such an extremely harsh environment, regardless of whether it was their bodies or their minds, all of them were under unprecedented pressure. Scouts were considered elites in any army, and because scouts were usually formed in small groups to carry out missions, they could encounter dangers and unexpected situations at any time, so they had to possess powerful individual strength. Colin did not know that among the Sin Domain scouts that he swept his gaze past, there were two big fishes. I wonder how powerful the 5 great generals are. Dooku was fascinated. About 10 kilometers away from the Sindor stronghold, the army stopped and set up camp. The numerous scouts were like a pack of wolves, observing from afar. It was Colin's first time stepping onto the desolate continent's soil. With such an elite group guarding their retreat path, Colin was completely at ease. The Gold Continent bandits had just appeared in the Yongming continent, which was extremely far from where they were. The possibility of the Whitefields continent being attacked was extremely low, but the cautious Colin still arranged a backup plan. After arranging the retreat path, Colin immediately led the army into the desolate continent. Dense energy spewed out from the enemy's camp like a fountain. It was destined to be an extremely difficult battle. After being used to seeing the imposing aura of the honorable martial stronghold, the stronghold in front of him was extremely simple and crude in Colin's eyes. But he was not anxious to attack but gave the order to set up camp. The large number of casualties gave them valuable information. In the entire desolate continent, other than the Sindor stronghold, the Sin Domain survivors did not build any other strongholds. That meant that as long as they took down the Sindor stronghold, they would be able to throw the Sin Domain survivors back into the cage that was the Sin Domain. 15-2. Of course they are. Colin is one of the 12 lieutenant generals. Other than the 5 great generals, he is one of the 12 most powerful people. Du Xian reminded. His barracks are extremely meticulous and there are no obvious flaws. According to Tang Tian's information, Colin's fighting style is extremely stable. From the looks of it, it truly seems so. Colin's expression returned to normal. After receiving the order, he had specially brought over a large amount of information regarding the Sin Domain from Temple. He had sufficient understanding of the Sin Domain martial artist's fighting style, and after finding out that the desolate continent's energy was thin, he quickly thought of a way. And as long as he gave the anxious soldiers a bit of hope, they would definitely fight to the death. Colin's expression was terrible. The situation was much more serious than he had imagined. One after another, strict barracks were constructed in an orderly manner. Only when they met Colin did they regain their attention. There are no flaws. Du Xian shook her head, her eyes lit up with an enchanting light aura. She was extremely excited in her heart. What is more exciting than defeating our mortal enemies? Du Xian bit her lips and said with force, "We will definitely win." A large number of Sin Domain scouts flew around the army like flies, seeing if they could find an opportunity. Colin did not care at all and turned a blind eye to them. The individual strength of the Sin Domain scouts were outstanding, but against the sturdy formation they did not pose any threat. From the looks of it, the Sin Domain scouts held the absolute advantage. The first battle was already enough to make people excited, but the first battle was against the honorable Martial Continent's army. The entire Sin Domain army did not even need to be mobilized as everyone was extremely excited. 10 minutes later, dense energy enveloped Colin's barracks. It did not dissipate as the barracks had an invisible force that firmly restricted the surging spirit energy. It feels terrible. After entering the desolate continent, the army immediately advanced towards the Sindor stronghold. Although the scouts on his side could not compare to the Sin Domain scouts, but Colin still persisted in sending out scouts, even if they suffered heavy casualties. Colin shook his head inwardly and threw the unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind. In terms of the formation of armies, he trusted Du Xian's judgment more. Dooku did not avoid Du Xian's gaze and spoke. "Regardless of the price we have to pay, we must win this battle." "How is it?" Dooku asked. The hatred between both parties could not be resolved. and the end of the battle would only end with one side's blood flowing. The scouts from both sides started to engage in an intense battle. This battle will not be easy. Colin did not care about observing and spying. It was an upright battle and there would not be many changes. No one knew how much effort they, the Sin Domain, had put in for this battle and what price they were willing to pay. Du Xian knew that she was still a newbie, and she would not hesitate to use all the chips she could. What a powerful opponent. Du Xian's tone carried a trace of praise. The Sin Domain called it the Desolate City, but Colin insisted on calling it the Sin Door Stronghold. This is the Honorable Martial Continent's territory. What qualifications do the remnants of the Sin Domain have to name it? The number one man of the Sin Domain, in such an environment he could unleash at least 90% of his strength. Dooku chuckled. Seems like he is a powerful person. He never fought a battle that he was not prepared for. In a sense, it was the Sin Domain army's first battle. The Sin Domain army was formed by the Du siblings, and consisted of the top elites of the Sin Domain. After that, they formed an alliance with Tang Tian, and attacked the Sin Door, which was also Tang Tian's God Armor army. This led to an awkward situation. Ever since the formation of the Sin Domain army, they had never fought in a real battle. That's right. Dooku could not help but sigh. Only now do we know that we were looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Be it the Honorable Martial Continent or Tang Tian, they are all huge beings to us. To have an enemy like the Honorable Martial Continent is our misfortune, but to have a friend like Tang Tian is our fortune. Fortune can help us, but the fate of our people needs to be fought for with our blood and blades. Dooku and Du Xian looked out from the stronghold, where barracks after barracks were erected. They were orderly and strict, and the atmosphere was somber. When the most important batch of resources arrived, he did not stop, and ordered the army to enter the desolate continent. To prevent his path of retreat from being cut off, he arranged for Oliver's army to guard the